That day, Amanda's life went downhill fast. Her husband Bill had had too much to drink and, as usual, was fooling around. Drunkenness is a bad thing, but this time his pranks went too far. He decided to teach his wife how to shoot a hunting rifle. Amanda didn't like the idea right away. She didn't even want to hold the gun and begged him not to. "Bill, please. I've never shot a gun before. I'm bound to do something wrong. I'll break something or hit a neighbor's window. God forbid. You'd better sign me up for the shooting range later," she begged her husband. "What shooting range is there? What do you need a husband for? You do not be afraid. Everything will be now. It's elementary," continued to insist husband. It was impossible to argue with drunk Bill. He constantly psychologically pressured the man and forced others to participate in his entertainment even against their will. And so it was now. Her husband was twisting the gun in Amanda's hands in different directions, showing her how to hold and aim it correctly. And periodically he gave loud commands so that she could aim and pull the trigger correctly. Because of her husband's constant demanding instructions during the training, Amanda became confused and accidentally pulled the trigger just as the barrel was resting against his chest. They had just recently gotten married. Amanda didn't even realize what had happened at first. She stood there with the shotgun in her hand, watching the purple stain on Bill's white t-shirt. The shotgun was loaded with field ammunition designed for big game hunting. My husband thought that if he was going to hunt, he should hunt wild boar or elk. At home, he entertained himself by shooting at moving targets. But today, unexpectedly, the target was himself. Amanda was brought out of her stupor by her mother-in-law's scream. She and her husband were visiting her son. And now, apparently Grace had gone out into the yard to check on the young ones. Then everything, mind you, spun like a kaleidoscope. The ambulance and the police arrived. Amanda then vaguely remembered what had happened. It was all a blur. Deafeningly, as if through absorbent cotton, she could hear her mother-in-law's screams and wails and the questions the police asked her. "Citizen Amanda, you are under arrest on suspicion of murder and will now be taken to a detention cell for a decision on your detention. Is that clear to you?" Amanda remained silent, staring at one point. The policeman handcuffed her and led her to a squad car parked near the scene. The only thing her parents' lawyer was able to do was to change the detention to a non-detention order due to the suspect's pregnancy. Thanks to this, Amanda was able to get to her husband's funeral to say goodbye to him. But a new nightmare awaited her there. Amanda did not want to show her face to her parents-in-law, who now wished her death every time they saw her. So she watched the funeral procession from her hiding place. Suddenly, she felt a sharp pain in her back. Someone had hit her hard from behind. Turning around, Amanda saw a girl she didn't know with a face that was innocent and twisted with anger. She was holding a stick of some kind, which she appeared to be intending to strike again. "What, are you out of your mind? Why did you hit me?" Amanda shrieked, but quietly, so as not to attract the attention of the people present at the funeral. Another scandal she would not survive. "I'll kill you, you bastard," screamed the girl, and like an enraged tigress, pounced on Amanda. She barely managed to dodge another blow and grabbed the stick at the last moment. "Stop this at once," Amanda shouted, trying to take the instrument of crime away from the angry girl. "What did I do to you?" "You bitch, you killed the man I love. I'll never forgive you for that," the stranger wailed tearfully. "What lover? Are you mistaking me for someone else, or did you get the funeral wrong? They are burying my husband now." Amanda tried to understand the situation. "His parents forced him to marry you. He always loved only me. And even when you got married, he still came to me. And then you killed him and took him away from me forever," the stranger wept tearfully. "If Bill has gone to the other world, you will go with him. I will avenge him." Only now Amanda realized who was trying to kill her and why. She was facing the mistress of her husband, whose accidental death she feared so much. And now Amanda didn't know if he was really her husband or if her whole family life was a farce. Amanda lowered her hands and said quietly, "I didn't kill Bill, it was an accident. He was drunk, making me learn to shoot a gun. I didn't want to. He forced me. Then Bill was twirling the gun around, giving me commands on what to do. He gave me a command, and I got scared and pulled the trigger. That's how it happened." After these words, the stranger dropped her hands. The stick fell to the ground from her hands. The girl looked pitifully at Amanda and wandered away in an unknown direction. Amanda didn't wait for the funeral to end either, and before anyone noticed her, walked back home. She was now living with her parents, as her mother-in-law had kicked her out of the house she had bought during the marriage. She didn't want to return to the house where she had caused the death of a man, even if without direct intent. Anyway, at home, Amanda was afraid even of her own shadow. She waited for the verdict of the court. The trial did not last long, because for both the investigation and the court, everything was obvious. Brown's family was very rich. Grief-stricken Bill's family did everything to make sure that his daughter-in-law got a real term, and even her pregnancy did not stop them. As a result, Amanda ended up in a correctional institution, at which a children's home was organized, where pregnant and nursing convicts were kept. But apparently this child was not destined to see the light of day. Amanda had a miscarriage, and soon after a short stay in the infirmary, she was transferred to a regular barracks. There Amanda served the monotonous gray days of her imprisonment. 3 years later, a very different Amanda was released. Not that naive girl, but a woman who was wise to her troubles, cynical and self-aware. Fortunately, she was not alone in this life. She had parents who not only did not turn away from their daughter, despite the public censure, but also supported her in every possible way. They were also well-to-do people, so they were able to agree with the head of the colony that Amanda would be looked after during her court-ordered term of imprisonment. The lawyer presented the head of the colony with a thank-you note from her parents, and he promised the convict his personal patronage. As Amanda walked out of the gates of the penitentiary, she turned around to take one last look at the place where she had spent the last 3 years. "Goodbye," she said to the female officers on duty at the entrance. "Don't you dare speak," one of them said. "Goodbye." Amanda crossed the threshold of the checkpoint and squinted her eyes against the blindingly bright light. There was hardly any direct sunlight in the barracks, and the walks were no more than an hour a day. As a result, her eyes had gotten used to the daylight willy-nilly. As Amanda got a little more accustomed to the bright sun, she took in the sight of 2 human figures standing alone on the curb across the street from her. They were her parents. God knows how long they had been standing here waiting for her to come out. Even Amanda herself didn't know the exact time when the procedure would end. "Amanda. Daughter, how did you lose so much weight behind bars?" Deborah was like hugging a dried-up chicken. "What did those monsters do to you? I can't even look at you without crying. What did we pay the warden for? He's probably embezzling food at our expense. Daughter, you need to get better, and we'll take you abroad to the best specialists right away," Dustin added. Even he had tears in his eyes at the sight of the haggard face of his little princess, as he always called her. "But what foreign country could there be now?" Amanda answered her parents sadly, looking at them furtively, like a hunted animal. "I need to get used to normal life first." Amanda wanted to wander the streets of her hometown at least a little, to breathe the air of freedom, to get used to society and the eternal bustle of the city. After the measured, monotonous existence in the prison walls, she definitely needed rehabilitation and social adaptation. Her parents offered to accompany her, but Amanda refused. "If you patronize me everywhere like a child, I will never return to a normal, independent life," she said reproachfully. "Let the mother go." Dustin supported her and put his hand on Deborah's shoulder. Deborah looked at her husband with incredible sadness in her eyes, but remained silent. And so Amanda took timid steps into her once hometown, cautiously, as if an astronaut who had just stepped onto an unknown planet. A lot had changed in 3 years, and she no longer recognized the streets where she had walked yesterday. Life behind the barbed wire had not stood still. It had stopped flowing only for her and the other prisoners, having fallen out of the mainstream for only 3 years. Amanda realized she was already struggling to fit in. There were strangers rushing around, not caring about the problems of their neighbors. And Amanda was like a wild animal that had been locked up for a long time, and now decided to go free. After wandering around, Amanda decided to go to the mall to update her closet. She had really lost a lot of weight before going to juvie, and her old clothes were now hanging on her like a hanger. As she entered the store, Amanda caught a glimpse of a woman wearing large sunglasses who pretended to look in the window. When Amanda turned her head in her direction, she thought it was not the first time she had seen her today. In the store, Amanda walked between the rows of clothes, looking for something suitable for her trip abroad. Amanda didn't know what was in fashion, since it was very difficult to keep track of fashion trends from prison. All the prisoners there wore robes that they sewed themselves. The girl consultant looked at the customer, who was timidly looking at the latest collection of clothes. Now in Amanda, it was difficult to suspect a potential client of an expensive boutique, but the saleswoman's eye determined that she was a visitor, even if not ultra-fashionable, but very inexpensive clothes. Especially natural fur coat, which, although it was a little big, but clearly not from someone else's shoulder. Tastefully chosen branded shoes and a handbag from the collection of the past 5 years finally convinced her of the client's solvency, and she, putting on a smile, approached Amanda. "Mitzi, can I help you, young lady?" the saleswoman asked. "Yes, I guess so," Amanda said happily. Previously, the helpfulness and intrusiveness of salespeople had only annoyed her. "I can tell you which outfits are the most popular right now. Or are you looking for something specific?" the sales assistant asked. "I'm going on a trip abroad and I don't want to look ridiculous," Amanda replied. "Can you find me a closet for everyday outings? I will buy the rest on the spot." "So what country are you going to?" "If it's not a secret. I don't think I'm nosy. It's just that in Europe one thing is in fashion now, and in Asian countries, for example, they wear something a little different," said the saleswoman. "I'm going to Israel." Amanda was happy. "But then everything is much simpler. The women there don't care much about fashion. They are very fond of things made of natural fabrics. Many of them prefer country-style clothes. The main thing is that everything in the closet was as comfortable as possible." The consultant picked out the most suitable things, in her opinion, and handed them to Amanda to try on. Amanda was about to go to the fitting room, and then, casually glancing at the transparent street window, she saw the strange woman in dark glasses again. She was clearly watching her. This was beginning to make Amanda tense. She went into the fitting room, but her thoughts kept returning to the stranger who was clearly stalking her. Amanda's mood faded and her desire to choose clothes vanished. Apologizing to the consultant, she hurried out of the boutique. On the way out, Amanda noticed a familiar female silhouette darting over the ledge. She pretended not to notice the woman following her and walked past her as if nothing had happened. But when she reached the first corner, she turned sharply around the corner. There, hiding behind the ledge of the shopping center, Amanda waited for her pursuer. She didn't wait long. In a couple of minutes, the same stranger in big glasses appeared and looked around confused. Amanda jumped out of her hiding place and grabbed the stranger's arm before she could realize anything. "Why have you been following me around all day? What do you want from me?" Amanda asked. When she finally got a closer look at the woman, she realized who was standing in front of her. It was her husband Bill's mistress who had attacked her at his funeral. "Damn murderer," Amanda exclaimed. "My Bill's been rotting in the ground for 3 years, and you're already walking around free and going to boutiques. Where's the justice in that?" "Young lady, I already explained everything to you on the day of Bill's funeral," the woman replied. "I thought you understood. I had to take revenge. It's my moral obligation to Bill. I watched you all day, waiting for the right moment, but I didn't have the guts." She cried. "Bill and I loved each other so much, but his parents thought me. A girl from a dysfunctional family was no match for their son and forced me to marry you. Bill told me you were the daughter of a friend of his father's in the business. And by the way, I had a son after Bill died." "You have a son by Bill?" Amanda asked in a low voice, remembering her unborn child. "I do," the stranger replied bitterly. "And it's very hard to support him alone." Amanda, who herself had lost a child and didn't really love her ex-husband that much, as she had already realized in the zone, felt sorry for the woman. Suddenly, Amanda felt sorry for her former rival. "I don't think we have anything to share with you anymore," she summarized. "What's your name? We've been through so much together, and we still haven't met." "My name is Kayla," the woman answered. "And you must be Amanda, but you probably know that already since Bill, unlike me, must have shared information with you." "Yeah, he told me about you," Amanda nodded. "Kayla, look, I'm leaving here soon anyway, and you've got a baby on the way. It's kind of indirectly my fault that he's growing up without a father. Can you please take this money? It's all I have on me right now. I'll give you more after the trip and take my fur coat too. Yours probably won't keep the boy warm at all. It won't stand the harsh frosts." With these words, Amanda pulled off her expensive coat, which reminded her too much of the past. "Oh, come on. Why? I can't accept it. It's a very expensive thing," Kayla, trying to keep her pride intact, retorted. "Bill gave it to me once, so I guess you have more right to it than I do," Amanda said. Kayla looked at the coat with different eyes now, as if a piece of Bill was still on it. She timidly took the gift with trembling hands. "What about you without outerwear? It's winter," she worried. "I've already called a cab. It'll be here soon, so don't worry about me. You better give me your phone number. When I get back from my trip, I will definitely visit you and the baby." The women exchanged phone numbers and parted almost as friends. "Here's my cab," Amanda said, and waved goodbye to Kayla. A couple of days later, her parents took Amanda to Los Angeles to rest and improve her health. They had friends there, so she could stay with them and visit old friends. "Amanda, the California climate will be good for you," her mother urged her. "There's the Pacific Ocean. You can choose what you want. And if you get tired of the sea, you can often sunbathe on the beach by the lake. And the doctors here are among the best," continued to convince her mother. "They'll put you back on your feet in no time. Of course, February is not the best month for swimming, but the resorts of the Pacific Ocean are available all year round. And if you stay here longer, we can enjoy our vacation in Los Angeles to the fullest. We're already here. Do you really think I'm running away from here?" Amanda was surprised at her mother's stubbornness. "You might not run away, but you could spend the whole day in your room, refusing to go to the beach," she argued. "And you need to breathe fresh sea air, to be in the sun more, to get rid of this pale complexion at last." "My face is fine," Amanda tried to object. "Have you looked at yourself in the mirror?" her mother persisted. "Daughter, start. Look, I read in a magazine that you should drink carrot juice to get an even and beautiful tan. I have already agreed in the kitchen at the local restaurant you and I will cook carrot juice every morning. Dad doesn't want to get a tan, so he'll do without the carrot juice. But you and I will have some. Isn't that a good drink, sweetie? Just don't lecture me anymore," Amanda gave in. She followed all the doctor's recommendations, and after a month she was really transformed. Now in this breathing, healthy, beautiful, well-groomed girl was unrecognizable yesterday's prisoner. But all good things usually come to an end quickly. And so this fabulous vacation came to an end. Dad's business required his presence, and the whole family had to move back to LA. "Oh my God, we're finally home," Amanda exhaled. "It's nice to be home. But you have to admit, it's better at home," daughter, her mother smiled. "If it hadn't been for Dad's business, we would have stayed there for a couple more months. But alas, your father is a very busy man, and we can't stay in a foreign country without him for long, and we can't leave my father alone. You know he has a heart condition. You never know." "Mom, don't make excuses," Amanda stopped her. "I'm tired of this vacation and endless doctor's recommendations." Her father left right away, and while her mother did the chores, Amanda decided to look at the news feed. Nothing much had happened in the past month. The town had had a few power outages, and twice the water had been turned off. There had been a major sewer break once, just normal city life. Amanda was about to close the laptop, but then out of the corner of her eye, she noticed a strange photograph. It showed the body of a woman whose face was not visible, but what caught Amanda's attention was the painfully familiar fur coat. "Oh my God, that's the same Kayla who gave me her coat," Amanda gasped as she ran her eyes over the news article and covered her face with her hands. The news report stated that a week ago, unknown assailants had robbed Kayla Brown, hitting her in the head with something heavy. The woman died at the scene from the head injury she sustained. Police have appealed for anyone who knows anything about the case to come forward. "She has a baby," Amanda mumbled. She didn't sleep well last night. All night long she had nightmares. Strange images appeared before her, tormenting her mind. She periodically woke up in a cold sweat and was relieved to realize that it was only a terrible dream. In the morning, barely able to clean herself up after a sleepless night, Amanda decided to go to the police to find out the details of Kayla's death and to inquire about the fate of her baby. In the stuffy office, a middle-aged man in civilian clothes sat behind a desk. It was an investigator. This was where the Kayla Brown murder case was being investigated. Amanda had been told about it by the police. "What do you got?" The investigator asked gruffly. "Do you have something important to report?" "Hello, the thing is, I knew the deceased. Not close, of course, but I had a couple of conversations with her. And I gave her the fur coat she was found in," Amanda said. "When I saw that picture on the news of Kayla lying face down in my coat, I had the strangest feeling, like I was seeing my own body from behind, lying on the ground." "It's very similar," the investigator said, moving closer. "You say you gave Kayla Brown the coat she was later found dead in?" "Yes," Amanda nodded. "A couple days before I left for Israel for treatment. I was out of town for a month. I just got back from my flight yesterday, and when I was looking at the news, I came across this." Well, the investigator stretched out. "How can you confirm this? Does anyone know that you gave Kayla a fur coat?" "No," Amanda shook her head. "Not unless my mom did. I went shopping that day and came back to my parents' house in a cab without the coat. I handed it to Kayla at the mall, took it off and handed it to her. I got into a cab not far from home. My mom wondered where my coat had gone. I had to tell her about the gift." "And what was the need to give a coat to a complete stranger in the middle of the street?" frowned the investigator. "For you to understand what I did, I'll probably have to tell you the whole story of how I met Kayla from the beginning," Amanda sighed. "You're the only person who can shed any light on this murder so far," the investigator said. "To be honest, there are some things I don't agree with from the beginning. As we found out, the deceased Kayla Brown was not a woman of means. In fact, she was barely making ends meet. All of a sudden, this expensive fur coat. She was attacked, presumably for robbery. But they didn't take the expensive coat, and she had nothing in her purse anyway. So come on, tell me how, where, and under what circumstances did you meet Kayla? Every detail can be helpful." "I met her 3 years ago at my husband Bill's funeral," Amanda began. Amanda flinched. "Someone hit me in the back with a stick. I turned around and saw Kayla. I didn't know her name at the time. She tried to hit me again, but I dodged. Then I found out she was my dead husband's mistress, or rather, she was his fiancée, whom he really loved, unlike me. His parents married him to me, but I didn't find that out until after my husband died from Kayla." "And why did Kayla attack you with sticks?" the coroner asked. "She blamed me for Bill's death and wanted revenge," Amanda replied. "Did I have anything to do with his death?" Amanda lowered her gaze. "I served 3 years for manslaughter. My husband was drunk. That night he made me learn how to shoot a gun. He twirled the barrel while the gun was in my hands and yelled at me to get a better grip on the gun, to learn how to pose on. I was very nervous, and with a fright I accidentally pulled the trigger, and the barrel was pointed at him at the time. Bill died instantly. And after that everyone cursed me, his parents, his friends, and the mistress I found out about at the funeral." "So your husband's parents also wished you dead?" surprised the investigator. "Yes. In court they shouted that 3 years for the murder of their son was too little, and they wanted me to die in prison. And if I tried to get out, they promised to do justice on their own and send me after Bill." "So they threatened you?" "I can understand them," Amanda sighed, her eyes downcast. "After all, my only son is dead, and as hard as it is for me to admit it, I had something to do with his death. But why did you decide to give the coat to Kayla after she tried to kill you? It's kind of a weird thing to do." "Kayla was following me that day, but I spotted her following me, so I stalked her outside the mall. She admitted that she wanted to get back at me for Bill's death, but she didn't go through with it. Then Kayla cried and told me how much she and Bill loved each other, and that she had a son after he died and had to raise him alone. I felt sorry for her and the baby, and I wanted to do something for them. I gave away all the money I had on me, and that fur coat. Bill had given it to me anyway. It was hard for me to look at it because of the memories. So you're saying that, when you saw the photo of the murdered woman dressed in your coat, you felt uncomfortable because from behind Kayla looked like you in the case? The investigator asked. Yes, that's right, Amanda nodded. And if someone were shown a picture of me in that coat, would they mistake me for Kayla? I don't know. I guess if it looked like you from behind. I guess they could have, the investigator replied. Why are you asking me that? Do you think your attacker mistook you for Kayla? I didn't say that. You said it yourself, he objected. Now think about it. Was there anyone besides Kayla who was murdered who wanted you dead? Amanda lowered her gaze. Bill's parents had uttered threats and curses, but that's not serious, is it? It doesn't really count. The investigator stared at her in silence. Why don't you say anything? Amanda asked without waiting for an answer. Let's not jump to conclusions. I will check the information you have provided and contact you if necessary. And if you remember anything or find out anything, call me. The investigator handed her a business card. Here's my phone number. Call me at any time. Don't hesitate. I won't keep you any longer. Thank you for your information. Amanda left the investigative committee building with strange feelings. She had a haunting thought in her head. What if Kayla's death in her coat had something to do with their similarities? It's not a coincidence at all. If it is, then the perpetrator, having found out he was mistakenly targeted, may now be waiting around the corner somewhere for me too. Once home, Amanda began to frantically recall the events before she left for Israel. Amanda couldn't remember anything unusual, except her meeting with Kayla, but she now saw the incident in prison from a completely different perspective. When she was pregnant, she had been attacked in the shower room by 2 cellmates. They brutally beat her, after which Amanda lost the baby. No one punished her attackers, even though she pointed them out. And in the infirmary after the miscarriage and cleanup, when Amanda cried and wailed, Lord, why are you punishing me? Have I sinned so badly that even here you will continue to punish me? A passing doctor suddenly said, It is not God who is punishing you. God is too busy with his universal affairs to pay attention to pathetic people. He is deaf to our prayers. That's why people are forced to restore justice on their own. You got the punishment you deserve. You hurt people. You pay the price. What are you talking about? Who did I hurt? Amanda was surprised. I'm already paying for a stupid accident, a stolen human life, and my parents' grief. You're going to pay for a ridiculous 3 years in prison, the doctor said. It's not enough what happened to you. You should have died with your brood. Then the parents of the boy you killed would have some peace of mind. At the time, Amanda had thought the doctor was just being sympathetic to Bill's parents' grief, but now she wondered about the real reasons for this strange behavior. I didn't do anything to those women in prison. Why did they beat me up and didn't even say anything? They just beat me silently. They kicked me in the stomach on purpose. Who could have interfered with my child, she pondered. All roads led back to Bill's parents. If she got it right, the baby was a potential heir, not only after Bill's death, but also after his parents' deaths. But did they really have a hand up their own grandson? Amanda was horrified. We need to consult someone to untangle this tangle. With these thoughts in mind, Amanda left the house and headed to the notary. Since she hadn't signed up in advance, she had to wait in a long line. But Amanda was already determined to find out everything as soon as possible, so she bravely endured all the hardships of the notary. After a couple hours, it was finally her turn. She entered the notary's office. Behind a massive oak desk sat a man who was tired by this time and did not hide his irritation. What is the matter? He asked sharply, without looking up at Amanda. I would like to consult, the visitor answered timidly. But if you're here, consult. What exactly is your question? You see, my husband Bill died 3 years ago. I did not inherit, but I was pregnant by him at the time of his death. The baby was never born. I wanted to know if my child would have been entitled to anything if it had been born. Why ask about something that will never happen? The notary brushed it off. As a matter of fact, there is no child now. Accordingly, what does it matter what would have happened if he were alive? If only. Understand that this is very important, Amanda patiently objected. The fact is that I lost my child for a reason. I was brutally beaten, kicked in the stomach. I suspect it was done purposefully to get rid of a potential heir. So I wanted to find out what my child could possibly be entitled to, and could this have been the cause of his death? Please help me figure this out. Yes. I see that the case is really serious and complicated, sighed the notary. Do you have any documents about your husband's death? I only have a certificate from the registry office. They said that the certificate of dissolution of marriage in this case is not issued. Bill's parents got the death certificate. They handled the funeral. All right, let's get what we got. Let's check the probate registry. It's going to take a while. The internet's slow today, and the databases are taking a long time to load. So it's out of my hands. Yeah, you're lucky you got a fast download, said the notary. Bill, there is one. He carefully began to study the contents of the inheritance file, and after a few minutes of concentrated reading turned a surprised face to the visitor. "You are right in your suspicions," he told Amanda. "They could have gotten rid not only of the unborn child, but also of you. Did you know that you were also an heiress, since your husband had no will? Your husband Bill was a very wealthy man. Not only did he have the usual real estate and other assets, but he owned several financial companies. I'm guessing someone didn't want to give them to you. Why didn't you inherit within the statutory period?" "I couldn't," Amanda mumbled, nervously tugging at the strap of her bag. "Were you in the hospital?" suggested the notary. "I was serving time in a penal colony for the manslaughter of my husband," Amanda exhaled, and she felt better after hearing the truth. "What a twist." The notary leaned back in his chair. "And how long have you been out of the colony?" "A little over a month ago." "So you should then urgently apply to the court with a petition to restore the missed period of entry into the inheritance due to the mens. This is given 6 months after the grounds preventing the entry into the inheritance no longer exist. So we advise you do not delay with this case, and in the near future submit an application. Attach a certificate from the penitentiary to the application." "Thank you very much," Amanda thanked the notary. "You're welcome. I hope that our fears will not be confirmed and that you will not be in danger after submitting this application. Good luck to you." Amanda walked out of the notary's office with a trembling, excitement-seeking heart. The sun had already completed its daily run across the sky, and it was getting dark outside. It was the end of March, so it was getting dark early. "What am I going to do now?" Amanda thought. "If it really is all about that damned inheritance." She dug into her bag and pulled out the investigator's business card from there. Amanda remembered that the investigator had said to let her know if any new information came up. She dialed the number on the card. The phone rang with a long beep. A few seconds later, an angry male voice answered. "Yes, go ahead," he said. "Hello, it's Amanda. Remember I came to see you yesterday about Kayla Brown and her fur coat?" The caller recalled her recent visit. "Yes, of course I remember." The investigator's voice warmed noticeably. "Did something happen to you?" "I just came from the notary. He said I can still claim the inheritance from my husband Bill's death. And there's a lot of property there, including whole companies. The notary said that this could very well be the motive for the assassination attempt. So get back to the notary's office immediately and don't leave. Call a cab and come to me immediately. I don't talk to anyone and don't move until the cab arrives. On the way, don't call or pick up anyone. Do you understand me? Your life is in grave danger. I'm absolutely sure of that now." Amanda followed the investigator's instructions exactly, and in half an hour she was back in his office. "Amanda, in all likelihood your parents-in-law have put a decent bounty on your head," the investigator said. "And they probably know by now that the previous assassination attempt was a complete failure. I doubt that will stop them. But while the investigation into Kayla Brown's murder is ongoing, they may be laying low for a while. So we're going to have to bait them." "How?" Amanda asked in surprise, not yet realizing what the investigator was suggesting. "The notary advised you to apply for reinstatement of the inheritance. Is that correct?" "Yes," Amanda confirmed. "File it. And not only do it, but notify your in-laws, so we know they've gotten the information they need." "But that could provoke them." Amanda was frightened, realizing where the investigator was going with this. "Right," he nodded. "That's the idea," the investigator nodded. "We need to provoke them. If they really were trying to kill you but mistook you for Kayla because of the fur coat you gave her, then this is our chance to catch them red-handed and put them away for a long time. That's the only way you'll be safe. You know what I'm talking about." "I think so, don't you?" Amanda answered uncertainly. "Good, I will introduce you to operatives from tomorrow. They'll be watching you at all times, so don't worry about that. But please, even if you find yourself being followed, ignore them and pretend you don't notice anything. Is that a deal?" "Yes." "Now call a cab again. And don't go anywhere until I call you. Tomorrow I'll let you know when you need to leave the house to file your application. While you're at home, get all the necessary paperwork ready." "Okay," Amanda nodded. Her heart was pounding like a frightened rabbit, but she knew she had to do something to avoid living the rest of her life in fear. Waiting for someone to hit her over the head with a heavy weapon like Kayla, she hailed a cab and drove home. Amanda didn't say anything to her parents so as not to scare them. After calming down a bit, she went to the district court website. There she found the necessary application template and printed it out. Her father had all the necessary office equipment in his office. After filling out the form and making copies of the attached documents, Amanda took a breath. Now all that was left to do was wait for the investigator to call. She already had everything ready for the next step. That night, Amanda slept restlessly again. The nightmares never stopped haunting her. This time she dreamt of Kayla. She stood in the middle of some dark room, pale as death, and stared frighteningly at Amanda without saying anything. Suddenly some black shadows appeared and dragged a scared-to-death Kayla somewhere. She clung desperately to anything she could get her hands on, breaking her bloody fingernails. And Amanda heard her heartbreaking scream. "Son." At that moment, Amanda finally managed to overcome the obsession and jumped up as if she had just witnessed the nightmarish events in her dream. Her heart was racing again, she was short of breath, and a cold, clammy sweat broke out on her forehead. Oh God, Kayla really did have a little boy. I completely forgot about him and all the commotion, Amanda thought as she looked at her watch. It was 3:15 in the morning. I'm not going to get any more sleep after that nap. I better make some coffee, she muttered, and headed for the kitchen. The coffee finally chased away the remnants of sleep, and her head felt clearer. Amanda shook off the memories of the nightmare and went to get ready for a new day. You gotta be ready. Who knows when the investigator will call, she reasoned. Amanda was not wrong in her calculations. Being a man, the investigator was not going to get into the female nuances of the necessary preparation for going out. At 8:00, the phone rang. Of course, it was him. Hello? Amanda answered. Hi, this is Detective Brown. I already have your number on file. Yesterday I made all the necessary paperwork, and today you are already assigned to operatives. You can go to court first thing in the morning. I don't think there's a minute to lose. Every delay is a new opportunity for those who are hunting you now. We don't know yet if your in-laws attacked Kayla or if they hired someone, so be careful and remember all my instructions. Typical man, Amanda thought to herself and hung up the phone. A good thing I woke up from this nightmare at 3 a.m. and had time to clean myself up. Otherwise, I'd have to explain to the investigator why I couldn't go to court this morning. Even yesterday, Amanda had familiarized herself with the district court schedule. They opened at 9:00, so with the drive, it was a good time to leave the house. Amanda waited in another line, now in the reception area of the court, and sighed with relief when the bureaucratic procedure of filing one single piece of paper, which had caused her to sit so long in the general line in the court corridor, was finally over. On her way out, she sent a quick message to the investigator via messenger. Statement filed. On my way home. A minute later, she got a reply. Great, take a cab home. And from home write to your mother-in-law and inform her that the term of entry into the inheritance is restored. As you write, send me a screenshot of your message. And if then you get a response, it is also a screen, and forward everything to me. Amanda made it home safely. Despite the police officers assigned to her, she was still haunted by the feeling of fear that had haunted her since the night before. Now that Amanda knew that her mother-in-law might have been involved in Kayla's murder, and that Amanda, not she, should have been their victim, she was having periodic panic attacks. Her heart was pounding desperately in her chest because of its frantic rhythm, and the oxygen wasn't getting to her brain in the right amount, making her short of breath and dizzy. I had to stop and catch air with my mouth, like a fish thrown on the shore. After taking a sedative, Amanda texted her mother-in-law. Hello Grace, this is Amanda, notifying you that I have applied for reinstatement of my inheritance. I hope this doesn't cause any problems. Amanda took a screenshot of her smartphone screen with this message and immediately forwarded it to the investigator. About 10 minutes later, the phone vibrated, notifying her of the incoming message. The mother-in-law couldn't take it anymore. The messenger reflected a whole tirade of her fiery speeches. How could you, bitch, have the conscience to do this? It's not enough that my son was murdered, but now you're going to get your hands on our property. You'll never get your inheritance. I'll lay down my bones, but I won't give you a penny. God knows I didn't want this for my son. Who could have known that you would turn out to be such a bastard and kill Bill on purpose, so that you could run your bloody paw into our business? Grace screamed. Damn the day Oliver and I decided to marry Bill to you, so he wouldn't get mixed up with a troublesome wench. And Kayla would have been better off with her by now, so he'd still be alive. And now they're both silent. And maybe they'll be happy in the next world. But you should be rotting in your grave in their place, you bastard. Damn your whole family. They taught you how to inherit your husband's share of the business as soon as he dies. Damn you and your parents to hell. Cursing all of you to the seventh knee, Amanda did not answer anything, just secured the correspondence and sent it to the investigator again. A few minutes later, a reply came back from him. Wonderful. You can see that your mother-in-law is nervous, and she clearly did not like your intention to enter the inheritance. And when a person is very nervous, he begins to think badly and can do something stupid. That's where we're going to catch her. They're already aware of Kayla's death, and there's a circumstantial admission that you should be in Kayla's shoes. What's my next move? Amanda checked with the investigator. Write to your mother-in-law and tell her you'll go to the notary by tomorrow to apply for inheritance. Amanda followed the investigator's instructions. I'm sorry Bill is dead, but he's gone. And you and I are alive, so we can resolve this issue in a civilized manner. Tomorrow I will go to the notary who has the inheritance file to apply for the inheritance. I hope you won't prevent me from doing so. The mother-in-law received the message but did not reply. Amanda woke up the next day, determined. Today would decide her fate, or would she help the investigation catch Kayla's real killers and save her life? Or would it turn out that her mother-in-law had nothing to do with it? I mean, there's a chance it's just an unfortunate coincidence. The investigator instructed Amanda that she should get out of the cab at the beginning of the street and walk to the notary's office. This would increase the chances of the scheme succeeding. Amanda got out of the cab and barely able to resist the urge to look around for operatives and pursuers, walked to the notary's office. On the way, she had to pass through a small public garden. It was empty and deserted at this time of year. Amanda walked down the alley, straining her hearing. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. Amanda tensed up, but she didn't let on, she just picked up her pace. The man walking a little behind her also quickened his pace. Amanda was gripped by a terrible fear. She could no longer resist, absorbed in the noise of her own terror, and almost sprinted. The man behind her was getting closer, but Amanda, acting on the investigator's instructions, didn't turn around. Her nerves gave way. Amanda stopped abruptly. No stranger's footsteps could be heard either. Then she ran and was startled to hear the stomping of feet approaching her. Then she felt a sharp push in her back. Someone attacked her from behind and threw her to the ground. Amanda clung to the ground, squeezed her eyes shut, and clenched into a ball, instinctively covering her head with her hands in anticipation of a blow, but there was none. Then she heard the sound of some kind of commotion. When she opened her eyes, Amanda saw that two young men were twisting a third man who was struggling desperately. Finally, they managed to handcuff him, after which one of them approached Amanda, helped her up from the ground and said, "Citizen, are you all right?" "I think so," Amanda replied quietly, still reeling from what had happened. "Then you also stay here to testify. We are police officers," explained the guy who addressed her. "This man tried to hit you on the head with this crowbar. We prevented the attempt in time. Now we're going to bring in medics and specialists to examine the scene and remove traces of the crime. And then you'll have to come with us to the station," they told her. "Okay, if you say so," Amanda whispered, pale as death. The paramedics arrived and examined Amanda and noted the marks of her fall to the ground. There were abrasions on her palms and knees. She had rolled across the pavement during her fall to the ground. Her new pantyhose were ruined because they couldn't withstand the bumps in the city asphalt. It was good that her coat was not short, and its flaps could cover her skinned knees, which had been treated by the medical staff with some healing solution. The scratches stung. But Amanda had clearly learned from childhood that wounds should not be touched with hands, even if they itched terribly. After examining the scene, the perpetrator and his victim were loaded into a service vehicle and taken to the nearest police station. Investigator Brown arrived there shortly afterward. He took Amanda aside. "Now our bait has worked. The trap is sprung. Now we're going to find out who's behind this. I bet it's your mother-in-law. They hired this felon, and he's the one who killed Kayla. I don't believe in coincidences like that." "What about the mother-in-law? Won't they be arrested?" Amanda wondered. "I have a little patience. You just want everything at once, like in detective shows. That's not how life works. We've got the perpetrator. He'll lead us to our clients. And when we have a confession from your attacker and your mother-in-law, then it's their turn." Caught red-handed, the perpetrator at first tried to pretend he didn't know what he was suspected of. "Warden, you're insulting me. Why are you trying to pin someone else's case on me? I didn't assault anyone, not now, not ever. It was this citizen who started hurting me out of the blue, tripped and fell. I didn't lay a finger on her," Tyler said. "It was a special operation, and all the events are recorded on video, where you can clearly see how you pushed the victim from behind, and when she fell, swung the crowbar to hit her on the head," the investigator countered. "It was at that moment that our operatives arrived and disarmed you, so it's useless to deny it. We have everything recorded, and we can clearly see your face there," said Investigator Brown. Tyler, who was being questioned, was staring at the operative with his small eyes. It was evident that the criminal brain was now working hard and analyzing the situation. "If you, Tyler, want to get the pike, you need to be friends with us," the operative continued. The suspect immediately tensed up, and although he tried to pretend that he didn't care, it was obvious that he was listening attentively, and the operative continued to process him. "Tell us who ordered the assassination attempt on Citizen Amanda, and you'll be happy. You'll earn yourself bonuses for cooperating with the investigation, and if you remember something else interesting, you might even be a witness in the case. You didn't come up with all this on your own, did you? We're all human beings. We're all driven by necessity, and some rich guy offers to make a quick buck, bash some broad's head in. Who'd turn that down?" The criminal was silent, thinking over the pros and cons. He didn't know what else the police had on him, so he was afraid to blab and say too much. "My patience is not infinite, and the offer is one time, so you don't have much time to think." The operative raised his voice and began to press. "If now you play silent, we will prove your involvement. Believe me, we have enough evidence for that. And then we will calm you down to the fullest, and there will be no leniency for you. So what do you have in mind?" "Dried it up," Warden Tyler said dryly. "Her relatives made it up." "What relatives? Whose?" the investigator interjected. "That won't do. Tell me what you mean. Why do I have to pull every word out of you?" He was indignant. "Tell so that it was clear, and do not pretend, and state everything as it is, as if for the first time handed over the layout. I've already memorized your biography by heart. You're a big name in the criminal world, so don't play innocent." "I was talked out of going after this lady," and her father-in-law Tyler continued. "They said she killed their son and should pay for it." What exactly did they ask you to do? Investigator Brown asked. Get rid of their daughter-in-law by any means necessary. What is meant by the word get rid of? Did they explain it to you? Yeah, I thought maybe just maim her to keep her out of the way. But the woman who talked to me made it clear that she wants to see her sister-in-law in a coffin, and she hopes I will fulfill her request. And she would not be in debt and would generously pay for my services. But they promised to pay the full amount only after the result. How much did they promise you for such a trifle? 50,000 at once and another 100,000 later. And where's the money already? I owed child support. I paid some of it, spent some of it on food. What a noble thing to do, said Investigator Brown. You decided to give the money for the murder to the kid. Do you think that's the only way to get God's forgiveness? You don't need to scare God out of me, Warden Tyler snapped. Where was God when I was being beaten mercilessly by my alcoholic stepfather? Why did God let me run away from home to save my own skin? I was raised on the streets. You think I was a criminal from the time I was in diapers? Oh, don't tell me your heartwarming stories. The operative waved away. Many people have a hard life, but only a few become criminals. Those who follow the path of least resistance. It's easier to steal than to make money. Tyler frowned and shut down. The operative, realizing he'd made a mistake, decided to rectify the situation. Sorry, Tyler. It's not your fault. It's just a crazy day. Do you have the coordinates of the customers? I do, the suspect mumbled. You seized my cell phone. All the contacts are there. The operative pulled out the items seized during the personal search. Tyler had an old smartphone with broken glass in the bag. Is this your phone? He asked. Yeah, it's password protected. It doesn't have a function like your customers are recorded, Aunt Anya, the executor, muttered. That's original, the police officer smirked. Operative Brown flipped through the calls, took some notes and pictures. Okay, Tyler, you're done for the day. If you think of anything else, let the duty officer know. Suspect has been taken away. The operative relayed the information to Detective Dustin. A couple hours later, the investigative committee and police cars arrived at Brown's house. Investigator Dustin and 2 police officers cordoned off the building just in case. Dustin went to the front door. The police officers hid themselves so that they could not be seen through the surveillance cameras. But if anyone was watching the image or from the window, these precautions were useless. Dustin rang the doorbell. A dog barked in the yard, but the house showed no signs of life. The investigator rang it again. Young man, we're not going to buy anything from you and we're not going to join any cults. Go away with God, a woman's voice came through the intercom. Grace, open up, please. I'm from the investigative committee. There are new developments in your son's murder case. I need to talk to you about it. There was silence. But after a few seconds, the electronic lock clicked, announcing that the door had opened. Dustin, followed by the 2 policemen, walked through the yard to the barking of the yard dog. On the threshold of the house stood the landlady. Her face reflected a look of extreme concern. What is the progress in my son's case? Bill's mother asked anxiously. Did you prove that the bastard shot on purpose? Not exactly. But you're very close to the truth, Dustin replied. Where's your husband? Why do you need him? Grace was wary. I don't want to repeat the same information twice. It would be better if you called him, and then we could tell you both the purpose of our visit. He's in the kitchen. I'll go get him. The landlady disappeared into the back of the room and returned a moment later, accompanied by her husband. Grace and Oliver Brown, said Investigator Dustin. Yes, the owners of the house confirmed with one voice. You are under arrest on suspicion of attempted murder of Amanda Brown, they said in words that Grace and Oliver did not understand. The police handcuffed them and led them out of the house, putting them separately into 2 different service vehicles parked nearby, so that the suspects could not talk to each other about anything on the way. They were also questioned separately. Grace, your husband has already confessed, so there's no use in denying it, Dustin told the suspect after another one of her excuses. Moreover, your accomplice Tyler had ratted you both out earlier, so we have more than enough evidence to prove your guilt. I just feel sorry for you as a human being. As a mother, I know exactly what you're going through. My mom would cut anyone's throat for me too, so I'd like to do something to help you. But you're stubborn, and you're doing your own time with your lies. Son, if you understand, then why did you arrest me? Why don't you say anything? It's not my fault. Of course you are not guilty, nodded the investigator. Without you, I got you confused and led you astray. Repent, and you'll feel better immediately. Is that the price of a traffic accident? Sins to God and the priest. And here there is neither, answered Grace, still hoping to get away with it. The coroner is better off than any priest. He can repent of anything, especially if it's a felony. Grace, for the last time, I suggest you don't make things worse and come clean like your husband did. Otherwise, you will not see him again soon, because he will get the minimum penalty and you will get the maximum. Because of your age, you won't be able to go free, except with your feet in front of you. Would your son want that for his mother? Why don't you give him any peace even in the afterlife? Grace could not bear it and cried, She covered her face with her hands and sobbed loudly. "My son, on whom did you leave me and my father? Is there no world for us now that you are gone?" "Grace, drink some water," the investigator suggested, holding out a glass of water to the suspect. Grace drank the water and kept quiet. "Grace, if you're not cooperating, then I'm going to have to confront you," Brown said. The investigator called someone on the phone, and in 5 minutes Amanda entered the office. "What's that bastard doing here?" The suspect immediately lost her composure. "I warned you. Grace, you didn't want to cooperate with the investigation, so we're forced to resort to additional means of extracting evidence. There will now be a confrontation between you and the victim," the investigator reminded us. "Who's the victim here?" "She's the victim," Grace shrieked. "Yes, I'm the one who suffered at the hands of this murderer. My husband and I should be recognized as victims, and that bastard should be put away for life. He shouldn't be allowed to walk the earth and smoke the light of day." "Grace, I must ask you to refrain from insulting me," said Brown. "I understand you know a citizen named Amanda Brown." "That bitch still hasn't changed her last name," the mother-in-law boiled again. "How the hell do you do it? She killed my son to put her filthy hand in our family fortune, and you have the nerve to use his last name after his murder." "Grace, please calm down," Brown asked her. "Do you have it on record, Mr. Investigator?" The suspect addressed him. "I demand that she be deprived of the right to bear my deceased son's surname. She has no right to bear his surname after what she did to him. But you know what that bitch did. She shot him point blank with a shotgun, and then said it was an accident, and she only got 3 years for cold-blooded, premeditated murder. What's 3 years for the life of a young guy who had everything ahead of him? We don't have that kind of authority. If you think she doesn't have the right to carry your son's last name, go to court," Brown said. "There's another issue at stake here. You say you never threatened your daughter-in-law. That's not what she's saying, and even showed screenshots of your correspondence with her, where you cursing her, saying that in the place of Kayla Brown and your son in the grave should rot in the grave Amanda. By the way, how did you know Kayla Brown was dead?" "I don't remember. I think it was in the papers," the suspect replied in a panic. "What about the threats against Amanda?" "Don't call her that," the suspect whispered. "Okay, what about the threats against Amanda Brown? I have every right to do that after she took my son from me. What, now a mother can't even threaten her son's killer if the state can't deliver justice?" "But you've gone much farther in your search for justice, haven't you?" the investigator noted. "Tyler told us how he mistakenly killed another woman because of you. He's very angry with you, because now instead of 1 crime, he's got 2 murders and an attempted murder. You could have given us a better picture so we wouldn't have to identify the target by his fur coat. You didn't think of that." "How could they not? We thought of everything, but the fur coat was a bust," said the suspect. "Who made stupid Kayla wear that damn coat that day? It was her own fault. If she hadn't, she'd be alive right now." "I didn't tell you it was about Kayla," the investigator said. "Well, now that you're being honest, I'll tell you a secret. We found the cabin where Kayla Brown was killed. Tyler wasn't smart enough to change the weapon, so he followed Amanda with the same shotgun Mike used. And our forensics found traces of DNA on it belonging to Kayla Brown and, of course, Tyler's handprints and DNA. We also have his confession, including evidence against you and your husband," Brown continued. "It was you he named as the person who ordered the murder of Amanda Brown. And it was you who gave him the wrong tip-off by poorly describing the alleged victim and giving a photo of her wearing the same fur coat that was later found on the murdered Kayla Brown. Anything to add or object?" Grace remained silent, only occasionally casting angry glances at either the investigator or her sister-in-law. "Grace, have you been proven guilty yet?" Brown asked. "We have already collected the necessary materials in a sufficient volume for the court, so our conversations are more moral than legal." The suspect shifted her gaze to Oliver Brown. "You do not hide your hatred for the victim," continued the investigator, "are sure that she is guilty of the death of your son, and that she did it deliberately, out of selfish motives, in order to gain possession of your family fortune. So the motive is clear. The accomplices, including your husband, have confessed, willingly cooperated with the investigation, and point to you as the main initiator of this atrocity. So the court will have no doubt of your guilt." "And your husband?" Grace asked. "Your feeling is that he is old, so he will serve his 3 years and go free with a clear conscience. And so Bill won't have to forge on a loan while you're in the dungeons praying. So he'll get himself a young woman. And it was worth it to be so angry at your daughter-in-law, so that then 10 years to trample the zone and lose her husband." Brown grinned. "It was worth it," Grace said. "If I had to, I'd do a lot more than that for my son. That bastard shouldn't live after what she's done. And if neither the court of earth nor the court of God wants to get involved, then I've been doing it myself." With these words, Grace jumped up with incredible agility for a woman of her age and threw herself at Amanda like an angry cat protecting kittens. The investigator barely had time to run up to unhook her from Amanda. The suspect fought back violently. They had to call an escort because Oliver couldn't handle this woman who seemed to be off the chain. The distraught women fought to the death. The medics arrived and found numerous abrasions not only on Amanda, but also on Investigator Brown. Grace's nail layer was removed and her broken nails were photographed, which she had damaged in a desperate attempt to scratch out the eyes of her hated sister-in-law. The incident that took place only added to the guilt of the icy mother-in-law. She eventually gave up under the weight of the charges and confessed to everything. The investigator summoned Amanda to inform her that the case file has been submitted to the court. "Well, that's what Brown said. Amanda Brown, I have done everything in my power to ensure that the guilty do not escape responsibility. It's up to the court and the prosecutor's office to take it from here." "Thank you so much," Amanda replied. "You've done more for me than anyone I've ever known in my entire life. And Kayla can rest in peace now. Her killers will now receive the punishment they deserve. By the way, do you know what happened to her baby? She had a young son, no more than 3.5 years old." Yes, of course," Brown nodded. "I remember when we found Kayla Brown's body. She had a passport with a stamp on it that said she had a minor child. That's how we found out about the kid. Thank God he wasn't alone for long." The door was opened, and in the presence of witnesses and guardianship authorities, the baby was taken first to the hospital. And then the guardianship authorities took him away. I don't know where to, but I can ask the Juvenile Affairs Department. They cooperate with the guardianship authorities. "Please find out if it's not too much trouble," Amanda asked. "The thing is, this kid is my late husband Bill's son. If he has no other relatives, I want to take care of him. I promised his mother, Kayla." "I understand," the investigator nodded. "It's a guilty conscience. After all, you are indirectly responsible for the death of both his parents. What a strange fate for this child." Brown called the juvenile department, and within 10 minutes he had the address of the orphanage where little Tyler Brown had been sent. "Wow, Kayla didn't tell me she named her son after Bill," Amanda remarked. Sometime later, Amanda and her mother Grace came to the orphanage to meet Kayla's son. The caregivers brought the toddler into the director's office. He shrank fearfully toward the woman who had brought him to the orphanage and peered warily with his big blue eyes and thick eyelashes at the strange women. Amanda looked at the baby and her heart squeezed. She had seen baby pictures of her husband Bill. The baby holding on to the caregiver looked like 2 drops of water, like her late husband. "That's our Tyler Brown," said the director of the orphanage, smiling. "We don't usually show the children separately. We have an open house and a database for that, but this is a special case. Our people are superstitious." Someone quickly spread information about the tragic death of his biological mother. "They're telling all sorts of stories, like his own grandmother hired a hitman, and he mistakenly killed her daughter-in-law instead of the real one. And the rest of the story is crazy. How can people think of such things? The grandmother allegedly wanted revenge on her daughter-in-law for killing her son, and this son was forcibly married by his parents. And when his wife was alive, he ran to another wife, who then gave birth to our Tyler, and the wife found out about it and killed the traitor with a shotgun. Can you imagine what people make up?" "Yeah, they make up all sorts of stories," Amanda agreed and looked at Grace's mother. "And the poor kid can't find a family because of all the gossip around his relatives," the director of the social institution lamented. "As soon as they find out his personal data, everyone starts asking if this is not the same Brown, whose son killed her mother-in-law with the help of a killer. And it just goes on and on. I don't know what to do about it anymore. You could change the kid's last name." "I don't need to change anything," Amanda said firmly. "I'm going to adopt this boy. Please prepare me a list of documents that I must submit with the application." "You want to adopt him right away?" the director asked. "How about a temporary guardianship to start with? Or a foster family? It often happens that people take a child, and then they are disappointed and want to return it." "But canceling guardianship is one thing," the director said. "Adoption is a lot more complicated." "I'm not going to revoke the adoption," Amanda said firmly. "I knew both his parents well. That's why I'm not afraid of the rumors floating around about this baby, nor of any difficulties with his upbringing. Raising him is my moral obligation to his parents." The director looked into the eyes of this confident and well-to-do woman. She realized that little Tyler would be in good hands, and since the adoptee knew his parents personally, there was no better guardian for him. Meanwhile, Amanda wasted no time. She restored the term for the entry into the inheritance and formalized the inheritance share due to her under the law, which by its scope of property rights allowed her and her baby to live comfortably for the rest of their lives. While the inheritance and adoption were being processed, the court sentenced Tyler Brown and the Oliver couple. The first really got a break for active assistance to the investigation, and he was given 5 years in a penal colony of general regime. But the Olivers were not helped by their loud statements at the trial about the case of honor and revenge for the murdered son. The court did not consider it a mitigating circumstance, and it was not a state of effect either. As a result, both received 10 years each in a general regime colony. So justice, which they both advocated for, did prevail. Amanda, leaving little Tyler, his real name Brown, took him to Miami, where there was a lot of sun and a lot of sea resorts for every taste. They settled into a small villa on the beach and gratefully greeted each new morning. "Breakfast, flowers, grapes on the veranda," Amanda said. "Eat your fruit, Tyler, and get your strength back. You and I have great things ahead of us. You're going to grow up to be a great man. Maybe you'll become a great surgeon and save lives, or even an astronaut. All doors are open to you. kid, and it's up to you to decide which one you enter. The husband and his mistress were already rubbing their hands together, but they had no idea how their wife would teach them a lesson. Kira, as long as she could remember, had always dreamed of warmth, care, and attention. All this she lacked since early childhood. Kira's mom died of a heart attack when the girl was about 5 years old. Doctors warned Adelaide about the risks, but the woman still decided to give birth. For the first few years of her life, Kira was the most loved child in the world. She vaguely remembered those times: warm hugs, her mother's gentle words, and kind smiles. But of course, Kira couldn't remember the details. Mom's face was lost in the fog. The meaning of her phrases slipped away. Then Kira was left alone with her father, a sullen and taciturn man. He fulfilled his parental duties faithfully, fed his daughter, bought her clothes, even checked her lessons. But any heart-to-heart talks were out of the question. Her father asked only specific questions about her grades at school, her health, her plans for vacations. Sometimes he wondered if someone was hurting his daughter. That was all. Kira didn't know, couldn't remember if Dad had always been so unsociable, or if he had been so changed by the death of his beloved woman. From neighbors, Kira had heard more than once that her father loved her mother very much, long sought the favor of a modest beauty, and then, when Elsa married him, fulfilled her every wish. Kira was hard to imagine her eternally dissatisfied with something father so romantic, in love, attentive. Becoming older, the girl understood the father blames his daughter for the death of her spouse, accidentally overhearing his conversation with a neighbor. The men were standing in the stairwell, and Kira was just returning from school. The anniversary of Mom's passing was approaching. That's probably why the neighbors, longtime pals, had struck up this conversation. "I told her to get an abortion," Dad said quietly. "And she wouldn't have it. Let it be," she said. She had a feeling it would end well. Kira, hearing these words, froze under the stairs. She just couldn't go up now and make her presence known. "Well, that's how it ended up being okay at first," Uncle Vince, the neighbor, pointed out. Kira knew her mom was friends with his wife and Aunt Elsa. Kira was born. Adelaide still had a whole 5 years to live afterward. "That's so sad," Dad agreed. But her health deteriorated. I could see it right away. She got worse. And then there were those sleepless nights. You know, I tried to get up myself to see my daughter so Adelaide could rest, but I couldn't be there all the time. Those bastards. They finished her off after 5 years. That's for sure. Even the doctor confirmed it. Kira took it hard. She hadn't discussed it with anyone. And who would she tell? Her father, as it turned out, considers her the culprit of all his misfortunes. That's why he probably doesn't talk to his daughter much. Kira didn't have any grandmothers. Or rather, there was one Dad's mom, but she lived far away in the village. They saw each other very rarely, and of course warm, trusting relations between them did not arise. And girlfriends. What about girlfriends? You can't talk to them about such topics, they won't understand. They're just fine. Everyone has a mom and a dad. Not everyone has a mom and a dad. But mom's the main one. How many tears were shed into the pillow in her childhood, teenage years, longing for a mother the girl hardly knew or remembered. Sadness over the cool and strained relationship with her father. Kira dreamed of growing up sooner, having a family of her own, having children. She had no doubt that sooner or later a man would appear in her life who would love and protect her. And Kira would become happiness for him, a source of energy and inspiration. Her father probably loved her in his own way, took care of his daughter as best he could, worried about her future. It was her father who arranged for the girl to go to the University of Economics and Law, and even to the prestigious Faculty of Finance and Economics, and made some connections. And now his daughter, who would hardly have entered on general grounds, is a student of the best university in the city. No, Kira was not stupid or lazy. She always studied well at school and diligently did her homework. But just to enter this faculty required quite outstanding abilities. The girl didn't have them, so her father helped her. True, among Kira's classmates, as it soon turned out, outstanding abilities possessed few. So many then got into the university in this way either for money or by blat. Kira liked studying, and with classmates somehow immediately formed a warm, friendly relationship. A wonderful student time began. Life had changed a lot. Kira felt that very soon she would become an adult and independent. That means that her dream of a loving family is very close. In the 4th year, fate dealt the girl another crushing blow. She was left all alone, her father frowning and taciturn, but so reliable, died. In the shop where he was working, a gas cylinder malfunctioned and a fire broke out. There were few victims, but Kira's father was among them. Only left alone in the whole world, Kira realized that all this time felt the support and love of a loved one. Yes, her father was like that. He couldn't express his feelings, didn't speak much, but now Kira realized how much he did for her. About a year the girl came to herself, getting used to the new world without her father, and then Andrew came into her life. Andrew was a student of their university, but he studied at a different faculty at the law school. That year he, like Kira, was finishing his studies. They met at a common lecture for soon-to-be graduates, which was held in the auditorium. The young people were told about the very procedure of graduation, state exams and diploma, familiarized young people with possible employers, presented companies that offered jobs to the best and most diligent students. It was interesting. Kira happened to be among strangers. Her friends were sitting at the other end of the hall, but Kira was a little late, and there was no place next to them. Therefore, Kira had to settle down where there were still empty chairs. At first, all the girl's attention was focused on the stage. She caught every word of the speakers, even wrote something down. Kind of boring and unexpected question caught the girl off guard. She turned around to the speaker. A handsome guy was looking at her with a smile. A wide, white-toothed smile, correct facial features, and bright blue eyes immediately charmed Kira. There was such interest in them. The girl suddenly felt that she was not indifferent to this man. "It's deadly dreary," repeated the young man. "And the weather outside is so wonderful. Spring is in full swing. There's a festival of spring flowers in the park, by the way. Why don't we run away?" It was the first time Kira had seen this guy. Besides, the lecture was very important and interesting. And after it, Kira and her friends agreed to go to the library to prepare together for the test. But all this somehow suddenly lost importance, and the girl nodded in agreement. The guy glowed, as if her answer made him the happiest person ever. He confidently took Kira's hand and led her away from the classroom. The weather really turned out to be wonderful. The sun was shining brightly from a clear, soft blue sky, and the newly blossomed greenery was fresh and clean. The air was filled with the aromas of plants that were beginning to bloom. On the way, the young people got acquainted. It turned out that the guy's name was Andrew. He admitted that as soon as he saw Kira, immediately could not take his eyes off her. "You're just an incredible beauty," he said, looking at the girl. And the one, strangely enough, did not feel a shadow of embarrassment, although always distinguished by modesty. I looked at you. I dared to speak for a long time. I was so afraid you would send me away. When you agreed to leave with me, I had a mountain off my shoulders," Andrew admitted. Kira was pleased to hear those words. She liked Andrew more and more. What if she had forbidden herself to even dream about him so that she wouldn't be disappointed? What if he was the man she would later start a family with? Yes, these thoughts visited Kira at the first acquaintance. They started dating. Andrew turned out to be a reliable, loving, sensitive man. Having learned the story of the girl, he took her under his wing. In everything, he tried to help Kira. The guy even helped her make repairs. More precisely, he did it himself, almost alone, because the girl did not understand anything about it at all. A little more time passed. Young people graduated from university, and both got a job. Kira became an accountant in a small firm for the installation of intercoms. Andrew went as an assistant judge in the local court. Kira knew by then that Andrew was growing up without a father. His mother had given birth to him at a rather late age, as they say, for herself. She was a powerful woman who had spent her entire life working in a management position at the airport. Even now, at her advanced age, she was reluctant to leave her position. Andrew kept trying to introduce Kira to her, but for some reason the girl was afraid. What if Andrew's mother didn't like her? What then, if this woman will be against the relationship of her only son with a poor commoner? Andrew laughed at these fears. "Mom isn't like that. Yes, she's used to bossing around, but in everything that concerns me, she gives me freedom and autonomy. I've been on my own for 6 years. She's always worked hard, and I've stayed at home on the farm. So don't worry, I'm not a mama's boy, and she's not a monster. Still, Kira persistently made up excuses not to go to Andrew's mother's house. Worried, afraid of this meeting. And then Andrew proposed to Kira. It cannot be said that it was completely unexpected. Relationships of young people have long been strong, warm, very close. The way of life without each other they no longer imagined. The girl had no doubt that Andrew was exactly the person she had dreamed of since childhood. He gave her everything that Kira so lacked: love, attention, care, tenderness. With him it was possible to talk about any topic. A soulmate. A soulmate. Sometimes Kira couldn't believe her happiness. But all this might not have happened if she hadn't found herself that day at the lecture in the chair next to Andrew. Such a fateful accident. Andrew did everything beautifully, just like in the movies. Invited Kira to a restaurant to celebrate his small promotion. The girl did not even guess about the true motives of this date. Then suddenly musicians came up to them and played a beautiful melody. Kira, flapping her eyes in surprise, looked at the men in white tails. Then a waiter appeared with a luxurious bouquet of roses. Andrew took it from the hands of the young man and with a smile presented it to Kira, then deftly pulled out of his pocket a velvet box. "Be my wife," Andrew smiled, looking into Kira's eyes. "You are the most beautiful girl in the world. I love you and I really want to be by your side forever." The girl then even had tears flowing from her eyes, so moved was she. This proposal was made so beautifully. Andrew carefully prepared for the meeting, so much thought out. What was happening resembled a scene from a good, though not too original, melodrama. The young people began to prepare for the wedding. Both decided that they did not need a lavish celebration, just a party with friends from the university in a restaurant. And yet it was necessary to solve a lot of issues, to book a place in the registry office, to find a restaurant, to think over the menu. And of course now Kira had to meet Andrew's mom. There was no point in postponing the meeting any longer. Kira remembered the day she'd first seen Maggie. The girl had been terribly nervous, but the woman who opened the door seemed to be smiling at her quite genuinely. Tall, slender Maggie looked very stylish in her elegant dress, with her hair slicked back smoothly. A real lady. And she behaved in a very friendly and polite manner. True, Kira immediately realized that Andrew's mother belongs to the so-called cold type of women carrier, accustomed to work hard, compete, and achieve their own. From such a woman cannot wait for heartfelt conversations, warm hugs. You couldn't expect any worldly advice from her. Maggie will definitely not become a second mom. And in the role of a cozy grandmother, spoiling grandchildren with pies, it is also difficult to imagine her. But that's the small stuff. Maggie caused Kira respect and even admiration. You bet, because she achieved so much on her own, became a big boss and a wonderful son raised. All this alone, without the help of her husband or relatives. After the wedding, the young people began to live in Kira's apartment. Both worked. Andrew received a good salary. Enough even for some excesses: cafes and restaurants, beautiful clothes, concerts, and most importantly for traveling. For 2 years of marriage, Young managed to fly to the sea 5 times. Not to luxury resorts with 5-star hotels, but still it was a wonderful vacation. Fun, carefree, full of sun and warmth. Kira and Andrew together learned to lead a household. In principle, the young wife knew how to do everything because she had been living alone for a long time. But the head of the family had to master new skills. Although Andrew coped with it quickly and even as if playfully, Kira felt happier than ever. Nearby was a man who understood her half a word. Andrew listened with interest to Kira's news, accumulated during the day, in all situations took her side, and also often hugged his young wife on and off. Kira realized that she finally met the man she had dreamed of for so long, and mentally thanked fate for this chance encounter. And then the newlyweds had their first son, Max. The name was chosen by Andrew. That was the name of his neighbor, who paid a lot of attention to the boy and became for him a kind of replacement for his grandfather. This was a respected man, serious, intelligent. He headed the local factory for a long time. That would be our Max, as smart and responsible, turned out, dreamed the young father, rocking his tiny son in his arms. Kira nodded her head. She had slightly different plans for this child. The young mother wanted Max to be happy and healthy, and the rest was not so important. You didn't have to be a factory manager at all to feel joyful and peaceful. Max really turned out to be a lively and incredibly curious kid. He was ahead of his peers in many ways. Early went, early spoke. The baby constantly asked his parents questions, was interested in the world around him, tried to understand literally everything. Newly baptized parents did not want to soul in the firstborn. And so when he was about 4 years old, they decided that it was time to give birth to Max's little sister. Kira hoped that she and Andrew would have a daughter. She wanted to give that little girl all the things she didn't have: pretty dresses, fancy hairdos at matinees, conversations about girlish secrets like hugs and kitchen chores and such. But Vince was born a wonderful blue-eyed baby, charming in the first days of life, charismatic, attracting the attention of others. Well, for a daughter then? Next time Andrew smiled, rocking the stroller. It was their first family stroll through the city. Max was holding onto the handle of the stroller too. He was so looking forward to his brother, so excited to see him. But when Vince was brought home from the hospital, he was a little disappointed. It turned out Max had hoped his brother would be older right away. He'd imagined a boy with whom he could play catch-up or hide and seek. Time flew by at a dizzying speed. It turned out that coping with a couple of little boys at once is not so easy. And then Maggie suddenly came to Kira's rescue. Every day after work, her mother-in-law hurried home, quickly changed her clothes, had dinner and went straight to her daughter-in-law. Andrew was often delayed in court, sometimes came only late at night. By evening, Kira was completely exhausted, and at this difficult period Maggie appeared. To take care of the grandchildren, she would go out with the kids to walk in the yard. Sometimes they'd go farther, to the park. It was only 2-3 hours a day at the most. But how Kira waited for them every time. While the children were away, she had time to clean up, cook something, go to the bathroom. And all this in peace and quiet. It would seem a trifle, but for a young, tired mother, it was a real salvation. How grateful Kira was to Maggie. She repeatedly told her mother-in-law about it, and the latter smiled discreetly and replied that she herself was happy to communicate with her grandchildren. No, a warm and close relationship between daughter-in-law and mother-in-law never developed, although Kira wanted it very much. She invited Maggie to tea, tried to make frank conversations, but this woman was some too aloof, cold and inaccessible, like the Snow Queen. Either she had such a character, or she didn't like Kira very much after all. Eventually, Kira stopped worrying about it and accepted the situation as it was. Maggie did not interfere with her daughter-in-law with advice, reproaches, and moralizing. She appeared when Kira badly needed her, and helped the young mother a lot. Perhaps the woman herself did not even realize how she supported Kira in a difficult period. Some more time passed, the boys grew up. Now they both went to kindergarten, and Kira was finally able to go to work. There was more money in the family. The couple began to plan a summer trip to the sea. It was to be the first for their children. And then life in the country began to change. Enterprises were closing one after another. This fate befell the firm where Kira worked. The woman was out of work. Andrew's salary began to be delayed steadily, which, by the way, at the new price level was not enough even for the most basic necessities. Andrew was now practically never at home at all. After a working day in court, he ran around the city in search of part-time work, somewhere to guard a warehouse, somewhere to help unload a truck. The man grabbed every opportunity to bring an extra penny into the house. Kira was now at home. She was looking for a job in her specialty. She ran to interviews, gave ads in newspapers, but there were no results. As a result, the woman could not even find a job as a salesperson. The supply of jobs in their town at that time far exceeded the demand for them. Kira was glad that she had at least managed to find a job as a cleaner. Now she cleaned the entrances of the neighboring building in the early morning while everyone was still asleep. The pay was low, but the upside was that the job ended before noon, and the whole day was free. Money was scarce, the children were growing at a dizzying rate, and their clothes were quickly becoming too small for them. They also needed to eat a full meal. Andrew and Kira could sit on buckwheat or pasta, but the boys needed vitamins, meat, fruit, and milk. Young spouses were often close to despair. It was Maggie who kept them from being completely lost. She had long ago been cut down, as she was old enough to be on a well-deserved vacation. And just someone needed a warm place, which for a long time was occupied by a firm and principled boss. But for years of work at a fairly high post, Maggie managed to save a certain amount of money. She dreamed of buying a small house by the sea, where she expected to meet old age. But circumstances have changed, and prices have risen. Now the woman's savings would not be enough for a decent place to live, and she was not going to buy anything. So Maggie used her savings to sponsor a young family every month. Both Andrew and Kira knew that if anything happened, they wouldn't be lost. Maggie wouldn't let them go under. But at the same time, they both didn't want to abuse the woman's help, and so they tried, stretched as hard as they could. It was hard, and yet the feeling of a strong rear guard kept them from getting discouraged. Despite everything that was happening, Maggie still remained for Kira incomprehensible, almost a stranger. Her mother-in-law kept her distance from her daughter-in-law, and with her son she did not open up and did not hug. But with grandchildren, a different matter. Only next to them the woman blossomed. She unashamedly hugged, kissed, called affectionate nicknames. And the boys reciprocated her grandmother. Kira sometimes tried to talk about it with her husband. "Never mind," Andrew replied. "That's just the way she is." I will try to keep the text as close to the original as possible, without adding new sentences and paragraphs. The length of the text will be roughly maintained. Dialogues and direct speech I will highlight according to the rules of the Russian language. The text will be divided into paragraphs. Phraseologisms will be replaced by more modern or simple expressions. Punctuation marks will be inserted according to the rules of the Russian language. All names and city names will be replaced with American names written in Russian letters. Name substitutions will be made according to the suggested list or made up by yourself if the name is not on the list. Mom was always like that. He smiled. Just a person so kind, good, loving. But she doesn't know how to show her feelings. Maybe it's because Mom grew up in an orphanage, didn't get love as a child. So she doesn't know how to express her feelings. But she's reliable, and she doesn't abandon her own. When Andrew and Kira's sons went to school, Maggie took over the lessons. It turned out that she once, many years ago, wanted to become an elementary school teacher. Then the woman's career took a different path, but now the long-time dream was realized in her grandchildren. Grandmother enthusiastically practiced with the boys. She knew how to be strict and demanding, but at the same time she emphasized to interest Max and Vince, to instill in them the desire for knowledge, to develop the innate abilities of her grandchildren. While their parents were trying to make a few extra pennies and were out working, their children were not running around the yard as street kids. They were under the reliable supervision of their grandmother, who invested a lot in their development. The result was pleasing. Both Max and Vince were the best students in their classes. They also excelled in sports. Maggie had time to drive them to the volleyball club on the other side of town. In this sports center worked the best coach, and Maggie did not agree to anything less for her grandchildren. And so they lived, trying their best, supporting each other, raising their children. And then one day Andrew got tired of living, as the man himself put it, a miserable existence. He decided to risk opening his own business. It is clear that the money for the promotion of the businessman took from his mother. And where else? Not in the bank at a crazy interest rate to make loans. Andrew bought in a neighboring city from a warehouse small things, technical sold on the market more expensive and immediately received, albeit small, but a profit. Success inspired. Andrew decided to work in this direction and registered as an individual entrepreneur. Kira helped him with the documents. She was an economist. She worked as an accountant for a long time. So reporting and primary documentation were entirely on her. The couple rented a place in the market and started work. At first, the business was slow. The client base had not yet been built up. Links with suppliers had not been established. Profits in the first few months were either minimal or non-existent. I had to solve many different problems. Sometimes I even wanted to give up, but in the end the business went on, and the small store earned money. Finally, the family had some money, albeit small, but it was their own. They didn't have to ask Maggie for help anymore. Andrew had even managed to pay her back the money he had borrowed to develop the business. Kira knew that her mother-in-law tried to refuse, to give this help as a gift to the young family, but Andrew insisted. They still flew to the sea. The boys were old enough to be truly impressed by everything. Kira watched with what joy they were running along the beach, and her heart sank with delight. What happiness this was. There was more to come. Andrew's business grew. Soon the man opened a whole store, then another. Now he had a whole staff working for him, accountants, managers, salespeople. But Kira was given the opportunity not to work and to deal with the house and children. True, the boys had already become teenagers and no longer needed babysitters. But the family moved to a private house, and Kira had a whole garden at her disposal. For its improvement, the woman took up with energy and inspiration. And again, she thanked fate for what is happening in her life. A house of full cup, a loving husband, wonderful, talented children. Every day a reason for joy and pride. And the garden, where Kira felt herself a full mistress. Here she felt calm, relaxed, peaceful. The woman believed that her present life was a reward for what she had to endure as a child. She also often regretted that her father did not see how wonderful life was for his daughter. Probably he would be happy for Kira and certainly did not dote on his grandchildren. And yet, as time went on, Kira began to realize that something was missing. Andrew had grown distant. No, they still had a wonderful relationship. Her husband was never rude to her, always remembered holidays and their personal dates. Only he was too busy working. He came home late at night, traveled a lot, literally lived his life. Max and Vince are almost adults. They have their own lives, their own friends, their own interests. And that's fine. It's just a little sad that their sons have grown up so fast. And Kira hadn't had time to fully enjoy their childhood years. She'd been too busy surviving. Maggie remained alien and cold. Such a character. Kira probably didn't even know how or what to talk to her about until now. Their only topic of conversation was probably Vince and Max. Her mother-in-law was old, but she still looked like an iron lady. She refused to move into her son's house from her own apartment, where she'd been a full-fledged mistress. And Kira understood and supported her in this. And in this difficult period in the life of Kira again knocked happiness. She did not even believe her feelings at first. She thought just, it seems, afraid, even the thought of letting it be true. But then it all became too obvious. Kira realized she was expecting a child again after all these years. Andrew seemed pleased, but still took the news a little too reservedly. There wasn't the excitement in his eyes that he'd had years ago when he'd learned of their wife's pregnancy. Wow, this is unexpected, he smiled. Then he pulled Kira to him and kissed her. We need to find you the best doctors. We're getting older. You understand? Kira understood. And of course she was worried too. Pregnancy when you're in your 20s is very different from a woman in her 40s. There are definitely more risks. Sons took the news of the imminent arrival of a brother or sister positively. Wow, we will have a little one. Max smiled. It's so weird, Vince shook his head. But I like little one. It's fun. They're funny, Maggie smiled at the news. Well, it's unexpected, of course. But it's nothing special. I had Andrew when I was a little younger than you. Everything's going to be fine now. Despite Kira's fears, the pregnancy went easily. However, as an older woman, she had to undergo more frequent examinations. At the next ultrasound, Kira lay on the cold couch and prayed to herself that everything would be all right with the baby. She, of course, dreamed of having a daughter. And for a very long time since childhood. After the birth of her 2 sons, the wish had somehow been forgotten. And there was no time for that. And now, having found out that she was pregnant again, Kira began to hope again. How she wanted to become a mom of a charming girl. The woman chased these thoughts away from herself, convinced that one should be happy about any child. And it is unlikely that after 2 boys suddenly such a miracle will happen. Why would it suddenly be a girl? Now, lying on the couch, Kira wanted only one thing, that this child that lives under her heart. Everything turned out to be all right. And boy or girl a matter of tenth. After all, how many of their cases are terrible? Being pregnant with her first sons, Kira did not know a lot of things. Now she had a lot of information that made her heart clench anxiously and her eyes stare into the face of the doctor, who was running a sensor across her abdomen to read her emotions. Kira kept thinking the doctor was frowning. How scared she was. Was it really that bad in there? Do you have a girl? Suddenly said the man in a white coat in a calm and mundane tone. A hot wave of joy flooded Kira's heart, even a little dizzy. She didn't expect to be told the sex so early, and now it was a girl. Was this really happening to her? Had her dream come true after all? After all these years? Is she all right? Kira asked the question she wanted to know. Everything is fine, there are no abnormalities, reassured the doctor. Kira was born on time. Kira had long ago thought of a name for her future daughter. It seems, still in the university, Emily. Kira, Emily, sounds similar, and that's great. The girl was born a healthy baby and soon became the family's favorite. Maggie now came to Kira's house every day to babysit her granddaughter. Once again, her help came in handy. Kira adored her daughter because she had waited so long for her. She had already stopped dreaming of such a gift of fate, but sometimes she needed time to go to the bath or to go shopping alone. And that's where Maggie came in. Time flew by at breakneck speed. Kira already knew that this is what happens when you have a small child. He's just a helpless little baby. Before you know it, it's already a person with its own character and hobbies. Emily turned out to be a pretty little girl. She took after Kira. She was just as dark-skinned, slender, and graceful. But her eyes were her father's bright blue, huge like two lakes. They shone on her beautiful, swarthy face. The boys grew up. Max graduated first. He easily got into the Boston Medical Academy. Max must have decided in the 5th grade that he was going to be a doctor. At first, his parents thought it was a frivolous hobby. But as time went on, the eldest son stayed true to his dream. In the end, he entered the medical school, and on a budget. Kira at first was afraid to let the young guy alone in the big city. But Max was serious and independent enough for such an enterprise. So in the end, the mother had to respectfully accept his decision. A few years later, Vince followed his brother. He also entered Boston University, but he chose a different specialty. From childhood, he was attracted to computers, programs, technical puzzles. His sons had flown the nest, and his husband was living a life of work. During this period, Kira realized what a happiness it is that she has a daughter small, beautiful, loved and loving. She filled women's lives with joy and happiness, made it bright and meaningful. If it were not for Emily, Kira would feel now all alone and not needed by anyone. Emily practiced ballet. Emily was a ballerina, and the girl was great at it. Choreographers all said the little girl has a real talent. Kira knew that her daughter went in her. Except that in childhood, Kira did not have such an opportunity to show her gift. Her father certainly didn't take his daughter to potential toys. Emily, on the other hand, did. The girl even traveled with performances in different cities. A real tour, and loving, caring mother everywhere accompanied her. It was a bright and rich life, which gave Kira a daughter. Everything was good, just wonderful. The boys studied and worked in Boston. Kira sometimes visited them. The sons were happy, and that was gratifying. Andrew was developing his business, which was becoming more and more profitable. Now Kira also had a daughter. A long-standing dream had come true after all. It would seem, live and be happy. But the heart of the woman more and more often clenched from some vague premonitions. Something was wrong, something was not right. Kira chased bad thoughts away from herself. Even to the psychologist was going to turn. But one day the reason for the vague anxiety revealed itself. Kira then went to the shopping center to find a dress for the next performance of her daughter. She wasn't feeling well, must have caught a cold somewhere. So Maggie stayed with her. Kira went to the mall alone. The woman was in high spirits. She had found a wonderful outfit for her daughter, and it was just the right size. She imagined how delighted her girl's eyes would shine when she took out this airy, shimmering with all the colors of the rainbow miracle from the branded bag. That's when the woman noticed Andrew. She just happened to glance down, going up the escalator, and saw downstairs, on the first floor, her husband in a bright orange shirt, which she herself gave him. It was a stylish shirt with short sleeves, summer, dressy and elegant, at the same time. Andrew liked it immediately, and now he often wore it to work. Andrew was not walking alone, he was hugging a young girl. From afar, Emily could not see the details, could not see the stranger's face, did not have time to estimate her age, but she noticed the main thing. Andrew's hand was resting on the lady's slender waist. She, in turn, had her palm in the back pocket of Andrew's pants, and Andrew was smiling happily. The world turned upside down in just a few moments. Kira was walking up the escalator steps as a happy, accomplished woman who thought she had succeeded in building a strong family. And she arrived on the next floor as a cheated and betrayed spouse to gather her thoughts. Kira went up to the food court. settled at a small table in the far corner of the hall and ordered herself a coffee. What she'd just witnessed. How to explain it? Kira really wanted to find some sort of justification for what she'd seen. She couldn't. If she wanted to, she could still convince herself that Andrew was just walking through the mall with a female employee. Maybe they wanted to look at a competitor's assortment or something, but certainly not like that. Andrew had his arm around the stranger's waist. Both of them were not embarrassed at all by people, who at this time in the mall were plenty. They walked with their arms around each other and smiled as if they were carefree free students, and between them there was clearly a special relationship between them. It was immediately apparent. Is Andrew cheating on her? It's hard to believe, almost impossible. But why impossible? Kira began to reflect on her life and realized that she and Andrew had long lived as close relatives, but not as loving spouses. All their conversations revolved around the children and their future. When was the last time they went out together? Besides, Andrew was too often missing at work, flying on business trips. Maybe it wasn't business trips at all, but traveling with young mistresses. Kira found it hard to breathe, as if she'd been hit in the solar plexus. She was short of air. Everything was spinning in front of her eyes. Was her happy family life just an illusion? And how stupid did she have to be not to see it? Kira decided not to get emotional. She pulled herself together and got up from the table. She should go home and act like nothing had happened. When Andrew returned, she would discreetly take his phone and look into his correspondence. Then it'll all make sense, and then we can do something about it. We need proof. Otherwise, it's a lot to make up. Maybe it's not that bad. That night, Kira put her plan into action. She'd always trusted her husband. It had never occurred to her to go through his phone before, and Andrew knew it, because his cell phone wasn't even password protected. The man had quietly left his phone on the coffee table when he went to the bathroom. He generally assumed his spouse was already asleep, but Kira wasn't asleep. As soon as the sound of water came from the bathroom, she slipped out of bed and went downstairs, grabbed her husband's cell phone, logged into his messages. And there was a lot of interesting stuff there. Kira learned that her husband's lover's name was Kate. She was only 25 years old, not much older than Max. The deceived spouse even saw numerous photos of young beauty Kate. Mostly on them, the girl showed all the advantages of her undoubtedly luxurious figure. Young, incredibly beautiful, bold Kate was not shy in expressions and wrote such things, about which modest Kira was even embarrassed to think. But Andrew clearly liked it. Apparently, the couple had already had quite a long affair. Andrew was firmly hooked by the young beauty. They called each other cute nicknames, made plans for a summer vacation. Apparently, lovers have not the first time they went together to vacation by the sea. It hurt to read this correspondence, but she needed to know what was going on. What she saw shocked her. She didn't want to believe it was true. The correspondence was also about Kira. Kate had called her lover's spouse an old woman, an old joke. Even Andrew did not try to defend his wife. On the contrary, he sent smiling smileys in response, saying that he was amused. How? How could this happen to them? They were once the closest and dearest people to each other, two halves of one whole. They had overcome so much together, and suddenly this. The sound of the water in the bathroom faded. Kira hurriedly put her phone back where it belonged and rushed into the kitchen. Let Andrew think she was just getting a drink of water. For now, she didn't want to show her husband that she was aware of this ugly affair on the side. She didn't want to, or she just couldn't. She needed to digest the news, figure out how to proceed. Realize, after all, what she really wants, and get used to the idea that Andrew an unreliable wall, behind which so cozy to hide from the hardships of life and the usual traitor. Outwardly, in the life of the family, nothing has changed. But now Kira became more attentive. Andrew's delays at work and his constant business trips were perceived quite differently. From time to time, while Andrew was in the bathroom or out without his phone at the neighbor's, Kira would look through his phone. Kate texted Andrew frequently. Some of the messages were quite explicit. They were usually accompanied by pictures of the girl. To Kate's credit, she looked great. Judging by the state of her body, the girl spent long hours in the gym. From the correspondence, Kira realized that Kate does not work and does not study. Typical Andrew content that he was apparently willing to pay for it all. No, Kira knew that men just over 40 often pay attention to young nymphs. Probably they feel younger, more energetic, stronger with them than with women of the same age. And what is there to hide? 25-year-old girlfriends, in most cases much more attractive than 40-year-olds. Spouse and reaper. But the woman thought her family wouldn't be affected. She remembered the way Andrew had looked at her, what he had said to her. He genuinely loved Kira. Once upon a time, she hadn't doubted that in the slightest. Could such feelings also grow cold with time? Kate. She was no longer just a lover or a girl for occasional entertainment, which at any moment can be abandoned, changed for another. The relationship between Andrew and his young lady was about 5 years old. Sometimes in their correspondence glimpsed historical dates, and the oldest of them came about the time when Susan was born. Apparently that was when they had met. Kira remembered that period of time after giving birth, and with a newborn baby in her arms. She didn't feel very well. She probably looked even worse. Kira was completely focused on her health. Her daughter, even her sons, had no energy at that time. Thankfully, by the time her sister was born, they had long since managed to become fully independent young men. Of course, Kira paid almost no attention to her husband, because as it seemed to her, it was not necessary. A grown man, passionate about his work. But maybe that was where the mistake lay. Maybe she herself was to blame for what was happening to their family now. Kira shook her head and chased the wrong thoughts away. What was her fault? It was Andrew, after all, who had decided to look for fun on the side. Noah would support his wife in a difficult period, to take on some of the responsibilities, to take care of his wife and newly born daughter. No, Andrew chose a different option. Maybe this lovely Kate isn't his first mistress. Andrew had been estranged for a long time. Kira was now clearly aware of that. It's just that the woman preferred not to notice such trifles as distant alarm bells. He earns, does everything for the family, does not drink, does not beat, does not humiliate, in money does not limit. Well, that's great. What else is there to complain about? So Kira didn't complain. She lived and enjoyed a happy, as it seemed to her, family life. And then suddenly it hit her. Maybe Kate was not Andrew's first mistress, but in the fact that it was with her, he had a fairly serious relationship, Kira did not doubt. Andrew was truly in love with the girl. It could be felt in the tone of his messages. What only affectionate words he did not call his mistress. The man protected his lady from household, financial, and any other problems, gave gifts, constantly interested in her desires. It hurt Kira to read this. Perhaps so he did not behave with her even in the most golden years of their marriage. It is understandable then they were spinning, surviving, pulling children, not to sentimentality was. From the correspondence, Kira realized that Kate was pressuring Andrew about the divorce. "When will you divorce your old lady?" the girl questioned, supplying the message with anger-red emojis. "All in good time," baby Andrew replied. "I'm in the process. A lot of things need to be prepared so that we can live not only happily but richly. My princess loves a beautiful life." After all that sweet tone, Andrew's usually reserved and serious tone almost made Kira feel nauseous. But she continued to read the messages, searching them for information about the impending divorce. This moment interested her more than others, because it directly affected both her and the children. Kira was not particularly worried about how her sons would take the divorce. They were already adults, and both of them had been living on their own for a long time. For them, most likely, little will change. But the daughter, she is used to this house and adores her father. Despite his indifference, the little girl will be very worried. Kira had no doubt about that. And something would have to be done about it. In Andrew's messages sometimes slipped that he did not rush into divorce to properly prepare for the care. What would that mean? The spouse was clearly up to something, and Kira wanted to find out what it was about. As far as her relationship with her spouse was concerned, nothing much had changed since Kira had found out about Kate. Faking ignorance was easy. Kira and Andrew had hardly spoken to each other for a long time. Hey, how's it going? How are the kids? That's all they talked about. And that's the life they've had for a long time. Why didn't Kira realize this before? Perhaps she was too busy with her daughter and immersed in her own worries and plans. Kira, of course, didn't tell Maggie about her son's life. She still came over occasionally to play with her granddaughter. There were times when Kira took Susan to her grandmother's house to run errands. But the relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law never became warm and frank. Over the years, Kira had trusted Maggie completely in everything concerning the baby. Perhaps it was the only person with whom the woman could leave her daughter with a light heart. But otherwise, over the years, Maggie and Kira had remained, in general, strangers to each other. No, of course, Kira couldn't tell Maggie about Andrew, though she wanted to share it with someone. Why worry the older woman? Of course, she'd be upset to hear about her son's behavior. Will be worried it will negatively affect her health. Of course, the mother-in-law will still find out about the divorce, which of course will have to go to. Even if Andrew had not planned this procedure, Kira herself would have organized it. Because how to live with a traitor. That's how she now perceived her spouse. Well, you fell in love with someone else, say it directly. Why lie, lurk, make cunning plans, thought Kira. Andrew had not even once pulled Kate back when she insulted Kira in her messages. She called her old lady and fat and stupid selkie. Andrew at best ignored these unflattering remarks, at worst replied with approving emoticons. It was offensive. But Kira was much more interested in the vague promises of the spouse to divorce as soon as everything will be solved financially. The spouse was preparing something, some kind of scam, according to the results of which Kira was to be left with nothing. The man did not write about it directly. It is understandable correspondence with the mistress had a completely different character, was light, humorous, in some places passionate. But by some words and hints Kira understood that Andrew was up to something. But how would she know what surprise to expect? Surely the details of the plan Andrew and his mistress discuss when they meet. Kira, understandably, felt hard about the whole situation. The pain of betrayal, the uncertain future, the suspended state. And there was no one to share it with. If her mother were alive, how much easier would this misfortune have been to bear? Kira slept badly, nervous. She turned pale and shriveled. She became irritable, withdrawn. Her physical condition even worsened, with headaches. One morning when Kira was feeding her daughter breakfast, her mother-in-law called. "Are you home now?" Maggie inquired. "Yes," Kira replied, deftly slicing bananas, pouring porridge, serving nuts. "Andrew is already at work and my daughter and I are home." "Great, I'll be right over." Kira cheered. "That's great. So her mother-in-law would babysit Emily. She'll go to the doctor herself in the meantime. Her head was hurting too much. Have them prescribe some pills. I can't take it anymore." Maggie showed up, as usual, with a present for the great, a beautiful doll in a big pink box. The girl threw herself on her grandmother's neck. No, not because of the toy, of course, it was just that there was some special bond between Maggie and Emily. It seemed that grandmother and granddaughter understood each other without words. Something similar Kira had observed before with her sons. Maggie was a wonderful grandmother to all her children, sensitive, caring, attentive. It was surprising, considering her bossy, somewhat cold nature. Surprising, but wonderful. It's so nice to know that your children are so loved by someone other than you. "Good morning," Kira smiled at her mother-in-law. "It's so good to have you here. Emily has missed you already." "I'm actually the one who came to see you today." The smile directed at her granddaughter slid off the older woman's face. She stared at her daughter-in-law absent-mindedly. Kira immediately tensed, sensing that this was going to be about something serious. "Go into the living room and watch cartoons," Kira turned to her daughter. "Okay." Here was a rather dire situation for Kira. It seems that Maggie's mother-in-law guesses or knows about Andrew's infidelity. Maggie is clearly concerned about this and wants to talk to Kira straight, perhaps to caution her or give her advice based on her life experience. This is certainly a painful conversation for Kira to have. She's already suffering from her husband's betrayal, and now her mother-in-law is broaching the subject. On the one hand, Maggie's support can be very valuable in such a situation. But on the other, Kira, perhaps, will be even harder to realize that what happened has become the property of relatives. Overall, the conversation promises to be very emotional and challenging for both women. It is important for Maggie to approach this sensitive topic with sensitivity and understanding, not blaming, but trying to support Kira. And Kira will need to gain strength and patience to listen to her mother-in-law and perhaps make some difficult decisions after their conversation. The situation is far from ideal, but at least Kira has someone close to her who cares. Age was coming to an end as well. Kira didn't see any candidates around her for the role of a father for the future child. That's why she went to the resort that summer, to fulfill her long-time dream. "I lied to Andrew about having an affair at the resort to get pregnant," Maggie said. He wasn't the only one who thought so, by the way. I announced to everyone that my pregnancy was a conscious move, but it wasn't. Kira was silently catching every word. She'd never heard such candor from Maggie before. I was about 35 at the time, a young woman by today's standards, with everything ahead of me. Back then, I was considered an old maid. All the time to become a mother and a wife had passed. The train had left. Maggie continued. She wasn't too worried about it. Maggie was fully devoted to her work. She had a responsible position, and she was always busy. The woman liked to realize that she was such an important, indispensable person at the airport. She was respected, listened to, and even feared. Sometimes she wanted to have a child, but sometimes there were regrets that there probably wouldn't be a child. Maggie wasn't too upset, though. She herself had grown up in an orphanage. She had seen so many unhappy fates and wasn't 100% sure she could be a good mother and make her baby happy. That summer she was sent on a trip to the sea from the airport. Maggie could afford to buy the tickets herself, but the union honored her as Employee of the Year. It's nice to be recognized. The resort was wonderful. Comfortable room next to the sea. In 5 minutes walk, a wonderful dining room. And there, in this sanatorium, Maggie met Andrew's future father. It was a so-called business traveler, a young guy about 10 years younger than Maggie herself. He came from some northern town on work. It was Helia's first time at sea, and he looked a little confused at first. It even looked nice. Maggie first noticed him in the dining room. The young man immediately caught her attention. He was good, really good looking, this Helia. Hair the color of ripe wheat, bright blue eyes. Those eyes ended up playing a key role in Maggie's fate. He had amazing eyes. I guess they made me fall in love with him like a girl, Maggie said. I don't think I'd ever seen anything like them before, not even when I was young. Bottomless, bright blue, attentive. Andrew inherited them, and so did Max and Vince. Wow! Helia has no idea he has a son and grandchildren, and that they have his eyes. Maggie was now looking everywhere with her eyes for a cute guy. At first she didn't understand why she was doing it. But the guy was very young. I bet he'd have a lot of admirers soon. Young, pretty young things just like him. And so it was. For several days Maggie watched from afar as Helia returned to the sanitarium with one and another beauty. All of them were like a selection, slim, tanned, smiling. Helia himself smiled a lot. He had a wonderful smile. From it on his cheeks appeared charming dimples. One day the young handsome man himself approached Maggie. Helia confessed to me that he has been watching me for a long time. He's incredibly attracted to me, she said. It was unexpected to hear that. A young, handsome guy, whom I had been admiring from afar for about a week, but was giving me compliments that made my head spin. I was desperately jealous of all those young beauties with whom he appeared in the sanatorium. And he, it turns out, at the same time dreamed of me and did not dare to approach, afraid of rejection. He said I looked beautiful and inaccessible. Maggie and Helia began a stormy resort romance. They took many walks in the neighborhood, swam at night in the sea, laughed. Maggie felt 10 or 15 years younger around him. I don't think I've ever laughed so much even in my youth, she recalled. It was a wonderful week. I fell in love. I just lost my head, which I don't usually do, Maggie said. It was so unlike me. It was like Helia cast a spell over me. And I didn't see a lot of things. A lot of obvious things. Maggie always paid for her date at cafes, in the dining room, on excursions. He never gave her anything, but she didn't expect him to. Being around this guy was a gift in itself. Then one day Maggie woke up in her room, expecting to see Helia next to her. They'd taken a long walk along the promenade at night, gazing at the stars, talking about everything, and had fallen asleep with their arms around each other in the morning. Maggie felt so happy and peaceful in the arms of her lover. But when she woke up, she didn't see Helia there. I reached up and rolled over onto my other side, Maggie recalled. I still wasn't worried about anything. It had happened before. Helia had probably just gone out for coffee and pastries to surprise me. How nice it is to have someone care for you like that. Maggie dozed for another half hour, enjoying the peace and quiet. But the longer she was alone, the more she realized that something was wrong. Finally, unable to bear the anxiety any longer, the woman stood up. That's when it all became clear. There were no belongings of Galia, no clothes, no favorite wristwatch. He had even remembered to bring a little thing like perfume and a toothbrush. So Helia left while Maggie was asleep. He left quietly, so he wouldn't wake the woman and have to explain himself to her. How's that? Why? Everything was fine last night, Maggie wondered. A wave of sadness, despair, and resentment washed over me. I couldn't breathe. I wandered around the room like a stranger and couldn't find a place to go. My heart clenched with unbearable pain. I thought I had found my soulmate. Helia was so easy, so pleasant, and even though he was much younger, I felt supported by him. Nothing could have predicted this outcome. Even last night, Helia had hugged me tightly, showering me with kisses and compliments. I was seriously planning our future together, Maggie said. Helia lived in a small town up north. He even asked me to go there. And I was ready to give up my career, my apartment, my friends, everything to be near him. In desperation, Maggie opened her closets again and again. Could Helia have just moved his things somewhere else? And himself? Well, he might have been late for some reason. But Helia's clothes were nowhere to be found. But Maggie noticed some of her own things were missing. A box of gold jewelry. She had taken a small portion of her treasures with her on vacation. But they were her favorite 2 pairs of earrings, a dainty chain and a bracelet with small sapphires, original, exquisite pieces. The bracelet was actually brought to me from Germany, Maggie recalled. Now this jewelry box had disappeared. There was no half-empty bottle of Chanel, no. 5 on the bathroom shelf. In the safe closet, I missed 3 dresses I bought when I was on vacation in Riga. You can't find such dresses here. My heart clenched with a bad feeling. Was Gilia really just a criminal? Maggie asked herself. I should probably write a statement to the police. On the other hand, it would be shameful to have to confess to strangers that I lost my head like that, blindly trusting a young traitor. I'm a grown woman, a boss. Maggie sat down on the couch, hugged herself tightly, and began to sway. That's what I used to do when I was a little girl, she recalled. I grew up in an orphanage. There you can't get comfort and sympathy from adults. So I got into the habit of comforting myself. As an adult, I somehow outgrew this ritual. And now, in a moment of stress, the habit has returned. We should get out of this stuffy room and take a walk on the beach, Maggie decided. The fresh sea breeze would give her strength and bring relief. As she approached the front door, she noticed a note. Helia had left her some kind of message on the mirror. My heart jumped with joy, a faint hope that everything would still be all right. Maggie shared her memories. Maybe he's just preparing some kind of surprise? Maggie thought. And here I was almost going crazy with worry. But there was no miracle. Helia had indeed turned out to be a traitor. Only for some reason it was important for him to explain his behavior to Maggie. I guess by now you have already realized everything he wrote in a note. Are you crying? Angry at me, scolding yourself for being gullible. I don't know why I'm writing all this. Usually I just walk away. But you're really special. I can't do to you what I do to others. I really like you. You're strong and noble. And you're a real beauty. Probably any man would be happy beside you, but not me. I realized a long time ago that my happiness is different from most people's idea of a prosperous life. I like adventure, changing places, meeting new people. I realized long ago that I could never be with just one woman. Family, children, everyday life. It's not for me. That's the way I was born. My mother says I took after my father. I never knew him, by the way. He's also a vagabond, an adventurer. This man probably doesn't even know I exist. It doesn't matter, though. Of course, I haven't told you a word of truth. Well, almost none. The fact that you are very beautiful, intelligent, strong, I really think so. Those words of mine were sincere. As for my biography, I named the wrong city. I lied about my age. My name isn't even Helia. That's my favorite part. Making up a legend, pretending to be someone else. Some people imagine me as a young actor, others as a talented young engineer. It all depends on the inspiration. Sometimes it comes to me, and I compose a story about a tragic fate full of hardship. It's fascinating, interesting, exciting, and women love it. I know how to make them happy, even if it's only for a short time. Those glowing eyes of yours, those admiring glances. I make the gray everyday life of lonely ladies bright, colorful, magical. You have to pay for all these things in life, wrote Gelia. That's why I charge a small fee for happy weeks and days. You'll agree that it's only fair. Our week, it was one of the happiest weeks of your life, wasn't it? I'm moving on. New adventures, new stories await me. And you? No offense. You're really special to me. I usually leave in silence, I don't leave notes. But I wanted to explain myself to you. Maggie stared hurriedly at the sheet of paper. What she was reading was hard to put into her head. Helia, who was not even Helia, turned out to be a professional Alfonso, living off women, flitting through life like a careless butterfly. He plays different roles and enjoys it. Most likely we are talking about a special mental disorder, thought Maggie. But a normal person can't live like that. The strangest thing was that when she read the note, she agreed with Helia. The guy was right. This week really had been the brightest and happiest week of her life. Maggie decided to leave this story in the depths of memory, sometimes to return to it again, to feel those bright, positive emotions that gave her Helia. But it turned out differently. After returning from vacation, Maggie realized that she was expecting a baby. I realized that it was the child of Gelia, a man, perhaps not quite mentally healthy, she recalled. But I decided to keep it because first of all, I was tired of being all alone, and secondly, I guess I still loved Helia. Or rather, the image that young man had created. At the due date, a wonderful, healthy, and strong boy was born. He had Helia's eyes. Maggie had noticed that back at the birth center. The handsome, charming baby inherited other features of his father's appearance. He bore little resemblance to Maggie. The woman prayed that the resemblance to Helia would be limited. Knowing the genes Andrew had inherited, Maggie paid special attention to his upbringing. She developed in him responsibility, honesty, and kindness, and Andrew seemed to grow up to be a wonderful boy. With anxiety, Maggie searched in her son traits of reckless adventurer, as was his father Helia. But she didn't find them. Andrew faithfully prepared his lessons, never skipped classes at school, and then at the university. When the guy grew up, Maggie watched his relations with girls with bated breath. But even here, Andrew did not resemble Helia in any way. Before Kira, he dated a former classmate. They had been a couple for several years in a row, no stormy short-term romances. When her son married Kira, Maggie exhaled. It's okay. Andrew has a beautiful wife, wonderful children, his own business. No, the son is nothing like the character of a wealthy Alphonse father. It's not that bad. But it turned out that she had rejoiced too soon. Maggie shook her head. Now I'm going to have to tell you the bitter and ugly truth about Andrew. I kept quiet while it was none of my business. Went through everything inside of me, but now my grandchildren's welfare is at stake. I can't let them be left with nothing. Kira knew what she was talking about. I know he's cheating on me, she said. Andrew has a young mistress. I've seen them together and even read the sweet couple's correspondence. Maggie's eyebrows rose in surprise. And why didn't you scandalize him? How did you even get over it? I'm just confused, Kira admitted. The opportunity to discuss the situation with someone made her feel better. Yeah, it's Andrew's mom, but I felt like she was totally on my side. I see. Maggie nodded. Anybody would be confused. So you know about this, Kate? Kira nodded, then asked, but how did you know about it? Andrew told me, Maggie said. He said he'd been unhappily married for a long time. That you, as a wife, do not pay attention to him. You've lost yourself in the children and the house, become uninteresting and indifferent. The usual male excuses. It was painful for Maggie to realize that the son, the only child, in whom so much invested, apparently still inherited the genes of his father. Even if not immediately, they had taken over. Kira could barely hold back her tears. But maybe he's right. I've been really busy with the kids in the house. Maybe Andrew really did miss my attention. I wish we'd talked about it in time. He's wrong. Maggie was adamant. There's more to it than that. Sometimes the feeling goes away. It happens and it's normal. But this is different. Andrew's lying to you, hiding, and that's the worst part. He and Kate are going to leave you with nothing. You and the kids. How? Kira gasped. She was used to the idea of Andrew cheating on her. And here was a new shock. It seemed to her that her husband adored children and would do everything to provide them with a happy future. And now this. Although these hints that he's preparing for divorce. They have a plan. Maggie shook her head sadly. When I heard it, I wanted to give up both the plan and my son. But then I decided to keep my emotions to myself. If I don't agree, they'll come up with something else. Now, girl, listen to me carefully. Andrew felt like a happy man. He achieved a lot in life, built a whole mini empire, organized a network of stores of sanitary ware. The man had a right to be proud of himself. His family life up to now, everything suited him: a beautiful wife, wonderful children, well-adjusted life. It was a kind of quest to get funds for the family, buy a new car, change the apartment to a large house. And then these tasks somehow ceased to fascinate and bring joy. It became too easy. Andrew no longer needed money. They were enough for new acquisitions, and for traveling, and for children's education. The man was suddenly bored. And then just at this very moment in his life appeared Kate, young and energetic, who loves adventure and adventure. She worked as a sales clerk in one of his stores. One evening, Andrew stopped by one of his stores to talk to the accountant, but she was no longer there. But behind the counter stood a new saleswoman, incredibly beautiful Kate. She was openly flirting with her boss. Andrew at first resisted the feelings that arose. His mother from childhood brought up in him responsibility, hammered into his head the true values of the family. But when it happened, he realized that all these years he had lived in the captivity of his own attitudes. With Kate, Andrew felt young and energetic again. She loved adventure as much as he did and was capable of risky actions. Existence without this girl now seemed bland and boring to Andrew. So it went on for several years. Feelings did not subside, but only flared up with renewed vigor. Andrew literally went crazy about his young, beautiful mistress. He did not want to part with her for a moment. But every night he had to return to Kira, and the atmosphere of the house, once warm and cozy, was now weighing on him. Andrew felt like he was in prison. His lovers were talking more and more about how he needed to divorce Kira. It was a done deal. True, both of them didn't want half of the property to go to his lawful wife. She didn't work, did she? Kate resented her. She was sitting at home, relaxing, watching soap operas, and you worked. All property should belong to you and only you. That's true, Andrew sighed. But the law is the law. Kira will be given half of the jointly acquired property. But isn't there a loophole? You can hire a good lawyer, Kate insisted. Let him figure something out. And one day there was. It was simple and complicated at the same time. It was suggested by a lawyer who was familiar with such matters. I have already had such cases in practice, he said. You need to sign over all the property to a person you trust, said the man in a stylish suit. And your wife should trust him too. Maybe a close friend or relative. My clients explain this to spouses to preserve assets in case of business problems. Everyone has their own version. After that, you can initiate divorce proceedings. There's no property, nothing to divide. And the trustee, after everything, just rewrites houses, apartments, cars on the already divorced spouse, that is, on you. That's it. Andrew thought for a long time. After this conversation, he had only one candidate for the role of such a proxy: his mother. Kira would easily agree to sign over all the property to her. She trusts her mother-in-law, but how to come to her mother with such a request? After all, you'd have to confess everything to her. Still, there was no other way out, and Andrew decided to have a serious conversation. He realized that his mother would not be delighted with the situation. But she's his mom. She will definitely support her son, help. It was a pity to give Kira half of what he earned, especially since Kate is right, the wife did not work, lived a quiet and relaxed life. What right does she have to all this? Maggie listened to her son in silence without interrupting. As always, she looked unperturbed and somewhat detached. The only thing that betrayed her anxiety was her fingers, which were relentlessly running over the long sleeve of her sweater. Have you made up your mind? Maggie asked when her son had finished. Yes, he nodded. Don't you feel sorry for Kira? I've fallen out of love with her. She's obviously indifferent to me. So now we have to suffer together for the rest of our lives. And what about the property? She hasn't invested a penny in the house or anything else. So it's all fair. I was the only one who worked. She was the one who provided for me. And she raised your kids, Maggie reminded me. Thanks to Kira, you could think of nothing else but growing the business. She always took care of the rest. And remember, at first Kira helped you a lot. Doing those reports at night, making estimates, Maggie said. And then you had a staff of accountants. You're exaggerating, Mom, really exaggerating what she did. All right, what about the kids? You could see that Maggie was taking great pains to control herself. What about the children? Are you going to pay child support? Help out like that. So you'll help me? After a brief silence, Maggie nodded her head. Andrew could see from her eyes that his mother didn't approve of what he was doing. Well, he didn't expect anything else. The important thing was that she agreed. Andrew signed over all the property to Maggie. Kira didn't suspect a thing. She immediately believed in the fairy tale that Andrew thus just avoid unnecessary risks. Kira had not been paying much attention to anything lately. All her time and attention was devoted to her young daughter. Well, all the better. Kate was as happy as a child. She should be, because everything was going so smoothly, without problems. It seemed to open up a happy, carefree future ahead. Kate and Andrew planned to celebrate their success with a trip to the sea. They had already chosen a resort, even argued a little about it. One day, when all the property was already rewritten to Maggie, Andrew dared to have a frank conversation with Kira. The man, of course, was worried. All the same, to tell the person with whom he lived for so many years, such news is not very pleasant. But Kira took everything surprisingly calmly. Naive woman, apparently, has not yet guessed that she will not get anything in the divorce. She would only find out in the courtroom. And even if she finds out sooner, there's nothing she can do about it. Andrew officially moved into the apartment he'd rented for Kate. Now it was just the two of them, waiting for the court hearing, after which Kira would have to leave home. Where? Her own apartment, the same one they'd lived in before Andrew's success. The ex-wife and her daughter won't be on the street. And the boys, they're already in another city. Young men on their own. You don't have to worry about them at all, Andrew said. And so finally the day had come. Andrew and Kate had waited so long for this date. Today, at last, everything will be over. Andrew will get his freedom. A little later, he will transfer everything from his mother to himself, and the sweet couple will fly to the beach with white soft sand. Kate decided to go to the meeting. Together with her lover, she put on an elegant marriage suit, emphasizing the advantages of her gorgeous figure, made light makeup, let her hair down. Andrew once again admired his beautiful beloved. Yes, she looked like a supermodel from the cover of a magazine. In his youth, Andrew had never dreamed of such girls. And here he was, a stunning beauty was in love with him. Being in the conference room, Andrew immediately noticed Kira. She looked surprisingly calm and dignified. For some reason, Maggie was sitting next to her. She was wearing a suit that she had worn as an airport employee on particularly important days, days when she needed luck. His mother's presence confused Andrew. He was worried, why was she here? She's sitting next to Kira. She's here to support her sister-in-law. Odd, given their plan. Kate tensed at the sight of her future mother-in-law, too. She'd taken a dislike to Maggie beforehand. Realized the older woman wasn't thrilled that a young rival had broken up her son's tight-knit family. So what? What did her opinion matter? Absolutely nothing. Maggie greeted her son and his companion with a nod of her head. Kira, on the other hand, said hello loud and friendly, even smiled. The hearing began. The judge read the divorce decree, determined the place of residence of the minor daughter with her mother, and announced the amount of alimony, which should now be paid monthly on Emily Andrew. And then it came to the most important thing of all property. Since you do not have any common property, you have nothing to divide, the judge concluded the speech. Yes, the marital apartment will remain for her. But that's not all, Maggie reminded her. It's all about the divorce case, the judge looked at her reproachfully. As for your gift, it's not a subject for discussion in court. What gift? Andrew jumped up, his heart clenched with misgivings. Kate, sitting next to him, smiled happily. She did not suspect anything yet. The deed of gift I made to Kira, Maggie replied, looking pointedly at her son. To Kira and the grandchildren. What did you think? I'm going to leave them on the street with nothing. so that you can live happily ever after, and they'll all live in a cramped apartment." Andrew's eyes went blurry. He hadn't expected this from his mother. He looked at Kate. The girl's beautiful face was twisted in an angry grimace. She opened and closed her mouth in surprise, trying to say something, but not a single word escaped her tongue. She even seemed to be out of breath. Kira looked calm and peaceful. The judge was reading out some more formalities regarding the divorce. Maggie was whispering about something with her sister-in-law, and it was slowly dawning on Andrew that it was over. Of course, Kate would leave him now. She wouldn't stay with him through the hard times. That was absolutely certain. He'd have to start all over again. All over again. On her way home, Ellen overhears her mother talking to her fiancé, is stunned. Her mother was talking. "Why do you keep listening to your mother?" Grace questioned. "Ellen, you're 36 years old, you're an independent woman. Your mom is your dependent. And you're still indulging her whims. The years are ticking away. Soon you'll be out of the running for a baby. You're almost 40. Ellen smiled sadly. She realized that Grace was right. That if she didn't have a baby now, she could say goodbye to that dream. She had never talked to her mother about having a baby, but in her heart she thought of a baby, her baby, her baby, so dear, smelling of milk and happiness. Try to find someone to have a baby with. Grace admonished her friend. There are only alcoholics, drug addicts, and men of non-traditional orientation around. You won't give birth to a child from the first man you meet, or you'll have a sick child or a child with a bad heredity, and you'll have to raise it yourself. So it should be taken seriously. And do you think that on me lame someone stole? Ellen doubted. Maybe just who? Drunk, and even then only for once. Drunken conception, I'm afraid. What if there's something wrong with the baby? Then his life, as well as mine, will now go down the drain. That's not true. Grace objected. Ellen, you're beautiful. Yes, pretty, but beautiful. It's just that your mommy makes you self-conscious about yourself. You know how our political economy teacher was hitting on you in high school, and you turned him down. Grace, come on. I was only 18 and he was 36. He seemed like an old man to me. And now you're 36 and you're going to say you're old? Sometimes I'm ashamed of myself when I see how big kids my peers have. I don't have any. You're wrong. Then why'd you blow off Dan from our class? He was only 2 years older than you. Yeah, Dan and I were in love. But it wasn't until he introduced me to his mom that I found out the first night that she already hated me. I went to offer my help in the kitchen, Ellen continued. And then I was stopped by Dan's mom's words. I overheard them talking. Are you out of your mind? Dan's mom said. Where did you get that ugly girl? What can she do? What can she do? And Dan told her. I don't want anyone else. I love Helene, and I'll marry her. When I heard that, I ran out of the apartment without warning. Do you know, Grace, how much it hurt? Then Ellen sighed. I don't care anymore. I've accepted that married life isn't for me. If normal women can't make a life for themselves, what about me? You didn't tell me about this, Grace said, confused. What's to say, Grace? I know I'm ugly. So what? Dan turned you down right away? No, on the contrary, he urged me to marry him. But I hesitated. And my mom supported me in my doubts. She said to me, you're lame, Helene. It's not for me to remind you of that. Accept it. It's a great handicap. And no one needs you but me. Vaughn, even your father, as soon as he had a normal son by his mistress. He abandoned you and me. You want to be abandoned all the time? Then marry your Dan. And you don't want to be abandoned? Live with me, I'll never leave you, I won't betray you. You're a fool, Ellen. Grace concluded. Your mom was just afraid to be alone. If Dan had left you, you'd have a child. And maybe even more than one. Maybe he wouldn't have left you. What's that supposed to mean? I know I'm an idiot, Ellen nodded. They say you should listen to your parents. They don't give you bad advice. And then I regretted 100 times that I listened to my mom. I don't know how she will react to the fact that I still want a child and will strive to get pregnant and give birth to a baby. Only if she's against it this time. I won't listen to her, Ellen said firmly. Are you out of your mind? Ellen's mother, Lexi, was outraged. Having a baby at 36, you're without a husband. Only a crazy person would do that. And I am crazy, Ellen retorted. You've been telling me that my whole life. I'm not ugly, that's why I didn't get married. But I can have a child, which is what I'm going to do. You can't afford it, Lexi said. And then, even if you do, how are you going to work and raise a child? Are you relying on me? I'll tell you right now, you can't count on me. I've had enough of you. Calm down, Mom. I'm not counting on anyone, Ellen replied. Are you pregnant already? Lexi asked, looking at her daughter point blank. Not yet, but I'll do my best in that direction. And your moaning is not going to stop me, Ellen said firmly. I've raised a good daughter who doesn't consider me, Lexi said hysterically. Are you going to go to the bar to have a baby who needs a limp? Ellen realized that her mother was on a rampage. And if she, Ellen, didn't leave the house for a while, her mother would drive herself to the emergency room with her tantrums. And Ellen didn't want that. She knew that then she would listen to her mother for 6 months, what a bad daughter she was, and that she almost brought her to a heart attack. As soon as the front door slammed, Lexi immediately came to her senses. Ellen was gone. There's no one to throw tantrums now. She had to think things through and stop her daughter's plans. After all, if the baby was born, Ellen would be on maternity leave, and almost all of her money would go toward it. Lexi knew it would take a lot of money to raise a child, and she wasn't used to denying herself anything. She was only 59 years old, and she wasn't about to turn into an old woman. Lexi's pension was small, but Ellen's paycheck was big. And Lexi's mother was happy to spend her daughter Ellen's money on herself, especially since her daughter didn't need much. Ellen knew that with her lame leg, no amount of dressing up would help her. Lexi, on the other hand, updated her closet every year and went to resorts twice a year. But if the baby came, Lexi would lose all of that. So she felt she had to stop her daughter and not support her delusion with a baby. A baby will destroy my whole personal life, Lexi thought. And I've already been deprived of it. I'm not going to let this baby come into the world. Ruin my life. Going to Grace, Ellen's friend, was not something Lexi wanted to do. She tried to see Grace on neutral territory to avoid interfering with Grace's family life. Now it was evening, and Grace was with her family. Plus, Ellen wasn't going to be home tonight. She knew that if she came home, her mother would throw an all-night tantrum. Ellen decided to call her paternal brother Alex, who she had been friends with since childhood, something her mother hated. Lexi hated Alex with a fierce hatred, believing that he was the reason her father had left the family. At first, Ellen thought so too, but as she grew up, she began to realize that her father couldn't stand her mother's selfish nature, around which the whole world should revolve. Hi, Alex. Are you alone tonight, or are you waiting for someone? Ellen asked. Alex was 7 years younger than Ellen. He had his own choker, which he was paying off on the mortgage, but he wasn't married and was quite independent. Hi, sis. Who should I wait for but you? Alex answered. Don't pretend. The girls must not leave the apartment. I've taken them all out so far, he laughed. Come in. Old lady will have a chat and tea. Or maybe something stronger. I'd like to spend the night. Will you take your sister in? Ellen asked. Where am I going to go? You can't choose your relatives, joked Alex. Buy some bread on the way. Good, I bought it. I'm waiting for you, Christian answered with a smile. Are you and Lexi on the outs, as usual? Exactly, Ellen sighed. But as you said yourself, you can't choose your relatives. She's a mother, after all. Except she doesn't like it when I get in the way of her plans. And I decided to do it my way and disobey her this time. How dare you? Christian said jokingly. And what is this idea that has been born in your beautiful head? Apparently it affects Lexi's personal interests, since her selfishness can't bear the change that has come over her cloudless life. You want to tell me what this horror you and your mom are fighting about? Or is it a secret? It's no secret. I want to have a baby, and my mom didn't like it. And I know why. I'm not a girl anymore. I know what's going on. That's news, sister. Christian smiled. Is the baby already conceived? No, Helen answered sadly. And this is probably the hardest part of my plan for the baby. I don't know how to attract men. I haven't been trained in this skill since I was a teenager. And from that age I was told that nobody needs me with my limp. I agree. I don't want a romantic relationship. But I just want to have a baby. Do you know how much I'd love him? With all my heart. I love him now. I don't know if I'm going to have my baby or not. Don't worry, sister, you'll have your baby, because you'll be a good mother. It's all good. The only question is, who are you going to have a baby with? Help me with that, please. You're really something, old woman. Christian laughed. How can I help you? Can I introduce you to some of my friends? Helene looked at her brother hopefully. Please. And what will you say to them? There's my sister. Help me conceive a child, Ellen begged her brother. You don't have to tell them anything. I'll try to have a relationship with one of them. If I can make it work, and the potential father of the baby won't even know he's having a child. You know me, Christian. I'm a man of my word. None of this pleased Christian, and he felt uncomfortable. But Ellen looked at him so hopeful that he couldn't refuse her. All right, he said reluctantly. I'll introduce you, and then you can deal with it yourself. You're back, Lexi said angrily to her daughter. She doesn't sleep at home. She's on the prowl for a substitute father. I never thought I'd live to see such shame. Ellen remained silent. She wasn't going to keep talking to her mother. She knew if she answered, Lexi would make a scene that would ruin her mood for the day. And she still had to work today. Tomorrow was Saturday, 2 days off. And Ellen didn't know where to escape her mother's wrath for those days. Right now she wished she'd bought a mortgage and stayed living with Lexi, who was drinking her blood one drop at a time. Ellen couldn't imagine living with her mother in the same apartment when the baby came. At least at work, she was taking a break from her. And with the baby coming, close contact was unavoidable. Ellen hadn't left work yet when Christian called her. Hi. So, old lady, get your battle colors ready and come to my place tonight. The groomsmen will be there at 8 p.m., so I'm waiting. I don't want any groomsmen, Ellen said sadly. I only want a child. Well, that's for you to figure out among yourselves who needs who and for what. My business is the side. I only play the role of matchmaker. Ellen, I hope you're not going to break me up with my friends by trying to get help. I'm a delicate man, Ellen assured him. I'm not going to be pushy. If it works, it works. And if it doesn't, well, that's just the way it is. But we have to start somewhere. All right, I'll wait for you, Christian nodded. Ellen decided not to go home. She decided to come to her brother's house a little early, sit down at the table and not get up until she left, so that the guys would not immediately see her peculiarity and would not be repulsed by her straightforwardness. Ellen knew she was an interesting conversationalist and decided to use that very trump card first. In her position, one must proceed with caution. She knew that even without makeup she was pretty and even looked younger without makeup. So she only brushed her long red hair and applied gloss to her lips, which she did in vain. After all, while she was getting there, she bit off all the gloss from excitement. Here, let's set the table real quick, Ellen set a bag of food in the kitchen. Wow, what delicious things. Christian admired, pulling out the gastronomic delights. Under these conditions, I'm ready to bring you a beau every day. Every day won't work, Helene said seriously. If it doesn't work out today, I'll close this door and think about how to realize my dream. I hope they don't know I'm limping. No, they don't. Come on, I'm kidding. You know I'm always here for you, sis. Before he could say anything, the doorbell rang. Christian ran to open it, and Ellen remained seated at the table, hiding her foot under the table. Two of Christian's friends, one of whom introduced himself as Emet and the other as Carl, walked into the kitchen where Helene, blushing with excitement, was sitting. Ellen, smiling, introduced herself. Ellen, the sister of that wonderful talker. And immediately, to dot all the I's, she added, Why didn't you introduce us to your sister before? Emet said, smiling broadly. You are selfish and greedy. You were afraid that they would steal Ellen from you. Everyone laughed at Emet's jokes and supported the feast with noise and friendship. Emet was more active towards Helen than Carl, but the pressure and youth of these boys scared her away. She looked at them and saw them as her brother Christian, and she did not see them as the father of her child. Ellen realized that she couldn't get into bed with any of them and take advantage of their youth. Now she decided for herself that the one who would give her a child must be at least the same age as her. And these are boys compared to her, one of whom she might have seduced but would not dare. "All right, guys. It was nice to meet your friends, but I have to go," Ellen said. "Christian, can you order me a cab?" Carl started to persuade Helene to stay and stay longer. He even volunteered to walk her home afterwards. But she flatly refused, which surprised Christian when she got up from the table and walked limping toward the front door. Blood rushed to Emmett's face. He stood before her red as a cancer and blinked confusedly, then pulled himself together and said, "I'll walk you to the cab." Ellen appreciated his gallantry. She saw in Emmett's and Carl's eyes pity for her. But she didn't want pity. She wanted the child. "No," Helene answered him. "Christian will take me. Forgive me for this adventure," Helene said sadly as they rode down the elevator. "Good friends you have. I never doubted you had such friends. You're the best brother I've ever had." "My birthday is in 2 months," Christian joked as usual, seeing that Helene was upset. "It's a little early for you to be singing dithyrambs to me," Helene Christian said. He hugged Helene and added, "Everything will be all right, sister. When I say that, it comes true. Do you believe me?" "I believe you," said Helene as she got into the cab. "I believe you the most. You're my favorite person. Thank you for being here." "That's a cool sister you have," Christian Emmett said when he returned to his friends. "What happened to her leg?" The last thing Christian wanted to talk about was Helene. "An injury," he answered briefly. "She's beautiful, but her eyes are very sad," Carl remarked. "I feel sorry for her." Christian didn't answer anything, and the friends realized that he didn't want to pursue the subject. "So how many rejections did you get today?" Lexi greeted her daughter with such hurtful words. Ellen regretted 100 times that she had prematurely initiated her mother into her plans. She didn't realize how many nerves she'd wind up on her mother's angry tongue. She knew her mother had never spared her. But that she could speak such derogatory words, Ellen didn't expect that. "Ma, have you decided to wear me out with your insults?" She couldn't stand it. "Foolish, my poor daughter. I'm trying to set you on the right path," Lexi said more gently. Ellen had a paycheck next week and Lexi had her own plans for that money. She understood that. That her daughter might get angry and her plans would be ruined. "Ellen, let's be reasonable. Why do you want to have a baby? We have a good life together. A child is a heavy burden to carry for the rest of your life. That's how I carry my burden, and I don't want you to suffer the same fate." "That's funny," Ellen laughed. "Mom, who doesn't know you and our life? I can't believe you've been busting your ass for me. I know what you care about. My money, which you spend most of the time on yourself. And when the baby comes, you'll have no access to my money," Ellen said. "So you're thinking about me?" "I don't. I know you, Mom. You've lived and lived all your life for yourself. And I'm your bank that you use. It's a good thing I was smart enough to stay in touch with Christian. Otherwise, I'd have no one to lay my head on. We're strangers, Mom. How painful it is to realize that. So you refuse to help your sick mother financially. And this is thanks to me for not putting you in boarding school. I wish you had put me in boarding school. Then I wouldn't owe you the debt you keep reminding me of. Don't be sarcastic, I'm asking you straight out. Are you refusing financial support? Mom, live on your pension like any other retiree. And if you need medicine, I'll buy it for you. If I can't live on my pension, I'll file for alimony. Lexi smiled wickedly. How about that? Suing your own mother. Do whatever you want. Ellen said tiredly, just don't count on my money anymore. I'll need it when the baby comes and I may have to move out. You fool. Lexi said something mean to Ellen. Who needs you limp? What normal man would go to bed with you? Ellen went into the bathroom, closed the door behind her, and turned on the water so the noise would drown out her mother's words, and she couldn't hear the curses she was sending her. Leaning over the sink, Ellen stared at her reflection. A tired woman, bruises under her eyes, the corners of her lips drooping, a haggard look in her eyes. "Hello, Scarecrow," she said to herself. "And the mother is not so wrong. Who needs a lame, damaged old maid?" There was an unusual silence in the apartment, and it strained no less, perhaps even more than the scandals with her mother. From her mother's behavior, Ellen realized that after her violent remarks, she was silent. At Ellen's appeals, Lexi kept silent, pressed her lips together and looked away, making it clear that she was ignoring her daughter. How long this would continue was unknown. Ellen was nervous, and she no longer had any energy or thoughts about how she would meet the potential father of the child. Maybe that's what the mother was counting on, she thought. Couldn't break me with words, so she found a more effective way. Yes, with this mood, it's not just thinking about a child you don't want to live. No, contact with the mother must be limited. We have to rent a place and leave her. Otherwise, she will bring me and herself to the unknown, decided Ellen. She was interrupted from her thoughts about renting an apartment by a phone call. "Hi, why haven't you called?" Grace's friend asked. "Hello, Grace. I've been fighting with my mom and I haven't had time to call. I didn't want to ruin your mood with my problems. That's my life right now. I could hang myself. My mom's been doing so much I've decided to get my own place. I can't take it anymore." "You should have gotten away from her a long time ago," Grace said. "Maybe you could have had a baby and gotten married. You made the right decision, Ellen. Otherwise, you'll be a servant to your mother for the rest of her life. And your mommy's temper might make you lonely faster. Selfish women like her live a long time." "You need help finding an apartment?" "No, I don't. I'm good. How's the baby making going?" It's not going anywhere. I tried to meet a couple friends for that. Yeah, I didn't have the guts. Couldn't connect with the guys. When I think about it, no, it's not for me." "I see," Grace said. "Listen, Ellen, why don't you try IVF? You can get embryos implanted and there's no need to look for them." "Not that, Grace. What if all the embryos survive and I have to choose which one to keep?" "No and no. And then I want to go through all the stages of motherhood from beginning to end," Ellen said. "I want to see the eyes of the father of my child." "Why do you want to see his eyes?" Grace was surprised. "As far as I know, the baby needs another organ to conceive." "Maybe you won't understand me, but in his eyes I want to see what kind of man he is. The father of my child should at least be kind." "Ellen, you'll never get pregnant for the rest of your life. And then why do you need his kindness if you're going to raise a child without his input?" "Then I can't explain." "I can't yet," Ellen answered. "Not until I take the job, I suppose." "You're not pregnant?" Grace asked. "I have a plan. My doggie's birthday is next Thursday, but the party's on Saturday. So I'll tell Timmy to invite a couple or 3 kind-eyed men, preferably single, so that you won't be bored and lonely." "How does that sound?" "That's a great idea. Why single men?" "I don't think that's really relevant here. You're not going to get married, and you're not going to hold men responsible. Not married ones, or married ones might scratch your eyes out and you wouldn't be able to see the goodness in the eyes of the one you choose," Grace laughed. "I guess you're right, friend." Ellen laughed. "That's why I love you. Grace, you can get a man out of any situation. At least I can laugh with you, because I've forgotten how to do it with my mother." "Okay, no need to thank me," Grace said. "I'm thinking we should make up a cover story. In case they ask why you're limping, there's got to be a mystery to your limp. You know how men love a mystery in a woman." "No, I don't. I wasn't a mystery woman," Ellen replied. "Let's stick to one legend, so we don't get confused." "Well, let's say you were traveling with your fiancé in your car before the wedding, and some drunk made a collision of his Jeep with your car," suggested Grace. "Your fiancé died on the spot, and you got a leg injury. You loved your fiancé so much that you never remarried. Imagine, every man would want such a mysterious, loyal woman. How's that for a story?" "A bloodier scenario," Ellen laughed. "Well, if it helps, I agree. Just don't tell everyone this legend before the time, but only when absolutely necessary. Maybe we can do without legends." Done. Waiting for a special invitation to the party. Faithful bride Grace laughed. "Bye, see you soon." Ellen was preparing thoroughly for Timmy's celebration. If she missed this chance, there would be no others. She bought a fancy new dress and shoes, even though she was going to hide her feet under the table. She made an appointment at the salon for a haircut and manicure. And all that preparation didn't escape Lexi's scrutinizing gaze. "Going hunting, honey," Lexi said Friday. "Make sure you don't miss." She didn't recognize her daughter Ellen had never been so meticulous about her appearance. And that was a bad sign for Lexi. Ellen remained silent at her mother's words. Then, to keep Lexi's mind occupied, she said, "Just so you don't get so annoyed, Mom, I'm moving out on Sunday. It's about time we got our own place." Lexi's eyes darted around. Her mouth opened and closed, but she couldn't get a word out. "Just drink some water and calm down," Ellen said. "And let's not get into this. It's irrevocably settled." Lexi took a sip of water and sat back in her chair. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. The grooming had evaporated somewhere, and almost 60 years read on her face. In that moment, Ellen felt unbearably sorry for her mother. But she realized that if she gave in to pity, her hell with her mother would continue. Ellen, like her friend, arrived at Timmy's birthday party early. She congratulated the birthday boy, helped Grace set the table, and sat down at that table, hiding her feet in her new shoes and her gait underneath. But only temporarily. After all, you can't hide a flaw like that. As soon as she got up from the table and walked, everyone would see her limping, leaning on her left foot. And no fancy dress or pretty shoes will help her. But there was still hope for a positive result in Ellen's soul. Her cheeks were flaming with excitement, her freckles gave her face a childlike innocence, and her long red hair was scattered over her shoulders. Helene's hair was always like that when she was excited. It was out of place. "She's good," Grace said. "If I were a man, I'd love you right here on this table." Ellen blushed even more. What do men look at? They look at their feet, and I'm not in the best shape. Forget about your legs tonight. Relax and attract men. You've got what it takes. Don't worry, I'm here for you. I got your back, girl. At Timmy's birthday party, there were 3 couples and 2 strange men. Ellen noticed one of them right away. He was the one she should favor. Greg the man introduced himself as a handsome man who looked like a catcher. "And for you, just Gosha." He smiled with all his magnificent teeth. He obviously knew that the ladies loved his smile. For the father of my child, he's suitable, Ellen thought. Handsome. Which means the baby will be handsome too. There's bravado and brazenness in his eyes, confidence in his irresistibility. But no anger. Let's see what happens next. Looks like they don't miss a single skirt. I hope he doesn't miss mine. The other was a little worried and clearly had some complexes, but his face was pleasant. He smiled at Ellen and introduced himself. Vincent. Vincent wanted to say something else, but Greg beat him to it. "And you, Helene?" Yes, Helene smiled. "Helene is as beautiful as a fairy tale," Greg said, and sat down at the table next to her. "Not only beautiful," said Grace, "but also wise." Ellen didn't like this presentation because everyone at the table was staring at her, and she was even more embarrassed and nervous. But then the toast to the birthday boy's health began, and Ellen slowly began to calm down. Greg was wooing her, talking and talking, clearly flirting with Ellen. He had her on the hook, and Ellen thought, just so long as he didn't snap. She flirted with Greg as best she could, and on Grace's recommendation, when she approached him, she tried to touch his hand. Across from Ellen and Greg sat Vincent. He glanced furtively at her and blushed, whether from the liquor he'd drunk or for some other reason. Vincent didn't speak to Helen the Beautiful. Greg didn't give him a chance. But when the dance began, Vincent jumped up and held out his hand to Helen. "May I invite you?" "No." "No," Helene replied fearfully. "I don't dance." Vincent remained standing in front of her with his hand outstretched. Helene was embarrassed that she had partially confessed her flaw. "I'm sorry, Vincent, my leg hurts, so I'm not dancing." It was only now that she saw the man's eyes. They were full of hope that had turned to despair. he said confusedly. "It's you, Helen. I apologize. I had the audacity to hope to dance with you." He sat down at the table, poured himself a full shot of vodka, and made a toast to the birthday boy. "To you, Timmy, to be loved, and that it be mutual. Otherwise, it's all for nothing." Everyone supported Vincent, applauded his toast, and continued the party. Vincent got up from the table and never returned to it. He must have gone English, Ellen thought. Somehow she felt guilty that he had left. Well then, that's it, there's no one to choose from now. Greg is the only one. And he's persistent in his courtship, and has already volunteered to walk Ellen out. And that's what she wants. Today he'll see her off, and tomorrow she'll move into a rented apartment, and under the pretext of helping her, she'll invite him to visit. And then she won't have to think about it. Greg had already made up his mind for her. All evening Ellen did not leave the table. She wanted to go to the toilet, but she was patient, afraid to scare Greg. But she had to get up, and she remembered that she had told Vincent that her leg hurt, and now she could limp under that pretext. "Sprained my leg," Helen said, as if to justify herself to Greg as they got out to get into a cab. "A sprain. Now I'm a limp leg." She laughed, and Greg laughed too, and then he picked Ellen up in his arms and kissed her on the lips and said, "What am I to do? Carry you in my arms, my Ellen the beautiful." It took Lexi a long time to fall asleep. Such attention to her appearance Ellen had never paid before. She must have had a man on her horizon and decided to have a baby. Lexi can't resist her daughter's desire to have a baby. If her daughter moves out on her, it's over. Ellen will be out of her control forever, and the money will be gone too. And what will she be able to afford in retirement? Nothing. And if her daughter stays with her, she'll have to pay the utilities and buy groceries. She's not going to take a bite out of her mom's mouth, and Lexi would save her pension for a vacation. She didn't see any other way out. She had to stop her daughter from leaving her. Tomorrow, Lexi decided I would cry and beg her to stay with me. I'll push pity, Lexi thought, and Ellen, the pitying one, will cool down. She wouldn't be so adamant. So far, Lexi had managed to manipulate her daughter, so she didn't give up hope. Sleep wouldn't come with the worry that she could lose everything. Absolutely everything she could afford. Her throat was already dry. She went to the kitchen for a drink of water. The window was open, and she heard a car pull up to the driveway. Lexi looked out and saw it was a cab with a man jumping out of it. He walked around the car, opened the back door, gave someone a hand, and Ellen stepped out of the car. The man put his arm around Ellen and pulled her to him. What was moving Lexi? She quickly threw on a robe, sprinting out to the entryway. The man was kissing Ellen. She was hugging him. "Oh, Lexi," the young man exclaimed when he saw her. Ellen and he flinched and recoiled from each other. The young man stepped closer. "Lexi," he said, "I hope you have serious intentions for my lame daughter, or are you just trying to make fun of her?" Ellen's face flashed as if she'd been doused with boiling water. Greg didn't know what to say. "I don't know what your intentions are," Lexi continued. "Ellen's intentions are that she doesn't care who she has a baby with. She doesn't know what she's doing. Age, you know, is driving her. She decided to have it for herself. But it is not certain that in the future she will not hold you responsible, if you, of course, fall for her tricks." Ellen was ready to fall to the ground at her mother's words. She, presented with humiliation, said nothing, and went to the front door of the driveway. Her mother stayed with Greg and said something to him, but Ellen couldn't hear anything and didn't want to. Such shame she had never felt before. Run, run, the thought pounded in her head. Run wherever I am, or she will drive me to I don't know what. While Ellen was getting dressed, Lexi came back from the street. "How could you embarrass me like that?" Ellen asked quietly, almost in a whisper. There was a lump in her throat that prevented her from not only speaking, but even breathing. "A daughter." Lexi suddenly burst into tears. "Maybe I'm not so right, but I don't want you to get hurt later. The world of men is so cruel." Lexi rushed to hug her daughter, but Ellen pushed her away. "Get your hands off me," she said. "Don't come near me. I'm so tired of you." With these words, Helene went to the bathroom, turned on the water so she wouldn't hear her mother's wailing, and, as always, asked her reflection in the mirror. "Well, are you happy that you found a contender for the baby's father? It was your last chance to realize your dream after all." She grabbed a heavy glass soap dish and threw it at the mirror. The mirror shattered and the shards sprinkled at Ellen's feet. She picked up one shard and brought it to her hand where the blue wreath pulsed. "Now interrupt that mole, too. There will be nothing, no limp leg, no pain, no shame. And there would be no baby." Someone was breaking at the door, shouting something, but Ellen didn't hear. Thoughts of the baby stopped her for a second. Nausea came to her throat, and she leaned over the sink. She threw up. She gripped the mirror shard so tightly she hurt her hand. Blood dripped into the sink. Her thoughts blurred, but thoughts of her baby kept her from following through. Her baby, who was in her thoughts, was now saving her. And Ellen suddenly realized that he was saving her so she could give him life. My baby," she whispered. Tears rolled down her cheeks and hail. The tension eased. She opened the door and stepped out. The horror. Lexi gasped. "Who's going to buy a mirror now?" "No one," Ellen replied. Here's what happened next. Ellen went to her room and propped the door open with a bulky chair to keep her mother out. She had been packing since morning. By 9 o'clock a cab was to arrive, and that was it. Goodbye to the past life. Hello, new one, Ellen thought. For a fee, the cab driver helped her carry her things into the rented apartment. Then Katya called. "Well, tell me about it." She poured questions. "Did the bow fall for you like a boy? Even your legends did not need? How? His eyes are kind or not?" laughed friend. "Katya, I'm already in the new apartment I rented. Do you want to come to my place and celebrate the housewarming? I'll pick up a cake." "Vasya, don't talk to me like that. I don't care about your cake. What I'm interested in is, did our plan work? Why aren't you talking? Vasya, are you crying? Did he hurt you? I'll be right over, send me the new address." An hour later, Katya showed up on the doorstep with a bottle of cognac and started praising Greg without any preamble. "What a freak. You can't say that. Now we'll treat your stress." And she put the bottle on the glass coffee table. "Do you have glasses for this drink in the house?" "I don't know yet. We'll see," Ellen answered. Katya stirred up the cognac. "And you need a double dose," she decided. "Men's offenses are cured only with a double dose of cognac. Can you believe me? I've taken a lot of shit from men. Oh, I've got a lemon in my bag and a chocolate bar, a noble snack for cognac." Soon they were getting tipsy, and it was getting easier. Drinking cognac, taking it as a medicine for the soul. Ellen told Catherine how her mother had embarrassed her in front of Greg. "Wow," stretched Katya. "Why do you put up with it, Vasya? Immediately expel yourself from your mother. Do you realize what she's driven you to? To suicide? Come on, let's have another round. It's a stress reliever." "Okay, men, to hell with them. But your own mother doing this to you. It's unbelievable." "I'm already drunk," Helene laughed. Helene was already smiling. "The medicine is working. Let's have another drink," Grace suggested. "That's enough. Just eat your appetizer." Why did Ellen obey Grace? She didn't know, but the cognac made her feel better. "You see, Grace, it was my last chance," she sighed. "What am I supposed to do now?" "What you need to do now is calm down, get some rest, clean yourself up. I'll figure something out. I'll check things out with Stas. Maybe Greg isn't such a hopeless case. Maybe everything can be fixed." I tried to encourage my friend. "We can still fight." "I'm not a village," Ellen muttered sullenly. "You didn't sleep last night, did you?" Grace asked. "Not much." "Well, that's fine. There's a warm bed here with fresh linen. Get some sleep now. I'll call you tonight. I've got to go home now, or Timmy's going to give me a hard time. Then I'll have to be treated." Grace laughed and walked out. Ellen woke up around 4 in the evening. Strangely enough, there was no sign of a hangover. She felt rested and alert. She hadn't had time to clean up since this morning, so she started it now. Tomorrow was work. The weekend was over. Ellen realized she was content not to see or talk to her mother. She remembered that when Grace left, she'd put her phone on silent. As soon as she turned it on, it rang. Mom popped up on the screen. So many calls from her mother during the day that Ellen didn't even bother counting them. She pressed disconnect and blocked her mother from the phone. Not now, Ellen thought. I can't even hear her voice. Late that night, Grace called. How are you doing? Are you back to normal? Did you get a nice apartment? Is it cozy? I'm here, Ellen said. I'm all cleaned up. I'm just sitting here enjoying the solitude. I've blocked my mom and somehow I don't feel guilty. Good for you. Take a break from each other and keep your toxic mom at a distance. Grace continued. Well, I'll tell you what, Ellen. Don't you relax at all. Get yourself some fancy clothes for your closet. Get some masks, some creams. Take care of yourself. You and I are on the path to cloudless love. We'll figure out what to do next. We women are the kind of people who don't just give up. You'll have a child, I'm telling you. I won't be me if we don't find you a man with kind eyes. Any other wishes, Helena the Beautiful? Grace laughed. No more, laughed Helen, except to come with me to the store and help me choose a closet. That would be my pleasure. I love shopping, even if it's not for myself. So, Ellen, are you ready to go to the beauty ball? Well, what ball? Ellen was surprised. Grace, couldn't you think of something more appropriate for me? What kind of ball would I go to with my legs? Wait, have you seen the movie Cinderella? What does that have to do with it? It does. So when I'm in a bad mood or depressed, I watch this fairy tale. By the way, I recommend it for self-esteem. It's exactly what all women should watch. I don't get it, Ellen said, confused. But look, Cinderella there all the time doing something, cooking. In short, working like a slave in the galleys. And her stepmother gives her so many tasks that she can't even go and look at the ball of her dreams from afar. What does her godmother tell her? Grace asked. What does she say? Well, she says it's very hurtful not to go to the prom, especially when you deserve it. And I realize I'm the Cinderella who works hard for her family. And it's bad for me not to go to the ball because I deserve it. And I'm going to the ball. I've never noticed that about you, Ellen said doubtfully. Grace continued. Do you go to discos? No, my children already go to discos. And my ball is shopping or beauty salon. Those are my balls. That's where I feel like a princess, not a dirty Cinderella. Long story short, I'll meet you at 6 p.m. outside the Merriam Mall. We're going to make a princess out of you. You ready? I'm ready, replied Ellen. Ellen and Grace walked around the mall from one store to another, and as they shopped, their mood improved. Satisfied with their purchases, they went to a cafe in the same center for coffee and sweets. I didn't want to upset you right away, and I'm not going to tell you exactly what Timmy and Greg said, Grace began, sipping her coffee. It's not going to work. It's a hopeless case. Your mother's done her best. Ellen, don't be discouraged. If it's a holiday on your street, it'll be a holiday on your street. I'm not despairing, Helen said. Even if Greg wanted to meet me, I do not know how I would look in his eyes. So Grace, relax. Relax. We're at a ball. The next night after going to the mall, Grace called. Here's the thing, Ellen. She began excitedly. She could hear that she was excited and eager to share the news. Hello to you too. Hello, Helene replied calmly. Oh, hello. There's such news. Grace continued. Tell me at once, are you standing or sitting? And without waiting for an answer, she began her fiery speech. If you're standing, you better sit down or you're gonna fall, girl. What else is there? Helene couldn't take it anymore. Speak already. Stop pouring water. You know who came to see me at work today? Grace, just tell me. What am I supposed to do with this riddle? Vincent came by, and he came for you. Ellen had a picture of Vincent standing in front of her with his hand out. What do you mean, for my sake? She asked, perplexed. That's what it might look like after editing. And the fact that he asked for your phone number means you shouldn't ignore strange calls, Grace continued. I don't know if he'll have the guts to call you tonight. He seems confused, probably shy or insecure. Well, just like you. I didn't want to give him your number at first. I thought I'd get it from you. Whether I could or not, he insisted, Grace said. I don't get it now, Ellen said. You just said he was shy or insecure, and suddenly he was pushing you. And he said to me as soon as I saw Ellen, I knew she was my woman. Please, Grace, help me. I have a lot to say to her, that's how he put it. Is it possible to say things like that? Ellen's cheeks flared as if she'd gotten too close to the flames. Her heart raced with excitement. Could a man really like her? And not just for one night. She didn't believe it, but she wanted to believe it. Why don't you say something, Helene? Or don't you like his eyes? Grace asked. Grace, I'm so confused right now, Ellen smiled to herself. His eyes are kind but sad. Can anyone really like me? You both have kind but sad eyes. Maybe that's why you need each other. Grace said thoughtfully. Listen to me, Ellen. He doesn't just like you. Do you hear me, Ellen? He said he's sure you're his woman. And that's a lot more than just liking you. Are you happy? I don't know yet, Helene answered. Don't scare this male away. At least use him as a donor. Does he know I have a limp? Helene suddenly realized. I'm sorry, friend, but I told him our legend, and I think he liked it. And he's not going to give up on you. On the contrary, he's even more interested in you. Ellen, I'll tell you something else. He knows what your mom told Greg. And you know what he said? That he's willing to grant you your wish, and he wants to take responsibility because he wants a baby too. This is what it might look like when it's edited. That's awful, Ellen said. How embarrassing. It's nothing to be ashamed of, said Grace confidently. He is ready to love you with all your faults and peculiarities. Love is out of the question now, said Ellen. How stupid you are, Helen. And I read you the wisdom. And this is the real love, without any conventions. When you're loved not for something, but against all odds. Of course, such love is rare, but I think you deserve it.
That's it. No more arguments. Wait for the call, Grace said firmly.
That's Grace. Neither hello nor goodbye, Ellen thought. But I'm so grateful to fate for my only friend. They'd been friends since they were students. Ellen, with her complexes, somehow fenced off friendships with her classmates, but Grace, with her assertiveness, was impossible to fence off. And Ellen was grateful for that. Vincent didn't call that day or the next. Helene had thought he'd analyzed everything after his conversation with Grace and decided not to contact her. But she was wrong. He did call. Ellen, hello. It's Vincent. You probably don't remember me, do you? Hello, Vincent. I remember you. I'm sorry I didn't get to dance with you. I have a leg. Don't make excuses, I know. It doesn't matter. I want to see you and have a lot to say to you. That's what matters. Do you want to come to my place? Ellen has the courage to offer. And we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. And I wanted to ask you out. I'm tired, Helene admitted. She didn't want to beat around the bush. She wanted a baby. And then it's up to her. I'm tired too. A lot of work. So I'm coming to you, Vincent decided. Sure. I'll drop you the address, Helen agreed. Are the flowers for me? She asked hesitantly, clutching a bouquet of fragrant white peonies to her chest. I'll give them to you often, Vincent promised. This is what it might look like after editing. If you let me, I will. Come in. Vincent, do you want tea? I will. I have a lot to tell you, Ellen. I've been thinking for a long time, so don't interrupt me, Vincent asked. All right, if you say so, Helene agreed. I know you want a baby, and I want it just as much as you do, so I'm ready. Oh, that's not what I'm saying. Anyway, I want us to be together. And the baby is secondary. No, of course. And the baby is secondary. Well, I'm confused now, Vincent said, blushing. Anyway, as soon as I saw you, I knew I wanted to live with you and grow old with you. Is that a declaration of love or a marriage proposal? Really? Ellen asked. It's both an explanation and a proposal, Vincent replied. But we don't really know each other, said Helene. We have our whole lives ahead of us. We'll find out. It was only when I saw you that I thought I had known you for a long time." "Let's not be in a hurry," Ellen asked. "I mean with marriage." "And the baby?" Vincent asked. "With the baby, we have to hurry," Helene said in a businesslike manner. She came very close to Vincent and looked into his eyes and remarked, "Good eyes." She wished her child had such eyes. Vincent put his arms around her and whispered softly in her ear so that no one would hear. My Helen the beautiful." And then the love of two adults turned into a passion that consumed both Helen and Vincent and carried their bodies into the world where the sacrament of the child's conception begins. "Vincent! Vincent!" Helene shouted to her husband, who was standing under the windows of the hospital. "Look, it's our son." Tears of happiness and love for the baby and her husband flowed down her cheeks. "Vincent, he has eyes like yours. Can you hear me? And his hair is red like mine." "I can hear you," Vincent smiled. "I'll hear you always and everywhere." "My Helen the beautiful." Grace heard a familiar voice behind her. "Grace, it's so good to see you." Lexi rushed over to Grace with a hug and even wept. Something Ellen's mom had never been sentimental about, and she'd always looked down on Grace. And now this. "Wondrous are thy works, O Lord." Grace thought about the change in Lexi. "I can't believe I had to go to this meeting," she lamented. "Hello, Lexi. How did you end up in this neighborhood?" Grace didn't know what to talk to Lexi about and realized the stupidity of the question. "It was Pete's birthday. I decided to come to this mall and buy him a present. There are so many different departments, I'll find something interesting," Lexi replied. "Pete. What's this new character I'm hearing about for the first time?" Grace thought, but didn't dare ask. She wanted to get away from Lexi as soon as possible, knowing that she would start pestering her with questions about Ellen. "Grace, I'm inviting you to the cafe here on the first floor. I'm so happy to see you. I just want to sit with you and drink coffee and talk about this and that," Lexi persisted. That's exactly what Grace didn't want. "But I'm in a hurry. I just ran in here for a minute. And my son, remember, he picked out his sneakers, put them aside. So I came by to buy them back. I won't keep you long," Grace began to justify herself. "Don't you have 20 or 30 minutes for your friend's mom?" Lexi asked in a very pathetic tone. "Okay, half an hour," I guess. Grace gave in. They drank coffee and cakes, and Grace looked at Lexi and thought, "Yeah, it's a little less glamorous. Ellen's lack of money has taken a toll on her mom's looks." "How is Ellen doing?" Lexi finally asked, staring at Grace. "She's doing well," she said shortly. "It's a dream come true," Lexi said cryptically. "It has," Lexi continued. "Ellen's son is so cute and funny." And then Grace burst into tears. "A redhead like Ellen. I love him. And his name is Alex. She named him after her father who left her." Grace didn't know what to say to Lexi. "She's been living in apartments with the baby," Lexi continued. "It's like I'm her enemy and she doesn't have a home." "No, not us. She got married and her husband has a 2-bedroom apartment." Lexi went completely numb from the shock. She leaned over to her cup of coffee and drank it in one fell swoop like water. It was obvious from everything that Grace had shocked her with this news. "Divorced and delinquent on child support. Ellen's hubby?" Lexi asked angrily. "He's probably sucking on her like a leech and sucking money out of her. There's plenty of men like that around." "Yeah, you were a leech," Grace thought. "There's a lot of them out there. He's divorced, but he's not in arrears. And he's got a good paying job." "Ellen's a rock," Grace smiled. "I'm so happy for her." "You've added fuel to the fire," Grace thought. Lexi suddenly burst into tears, almost to the point of tears. "She left her old mom and she's living in chocolate and doesn't even think about me. Maybe I'm starving. Maybe I need medicine. Maybe I'm not alive anymore," she wailed. Something doesn't fit with Lexi being in as much distress as she describes, Grace thought. "She came to an expensive mall to get a gift and invited me to a coffee shop. Don't cry, Lexi. You should be happy that Ellen is doing well, Grace reassured her. And is she? Lexi persisted. How does she live with not talking to her mother and Grace? Grace wanted to tell her that everything was fine without her. But she didn't dare. You never know what Lexi's going to say when she hears that. Married me, huh? You had to get married, Lexi said in a high-pitched tone. And at my age, why should I? Congratulations. Grace was genuinely surprised. It's wonderful. You're not alone. You have support, Grace said. God forbid I have support, Lexi said. But I didn't have a choice. I had to get married. I guess you could say Ellen pushed me into it. Is he a bad man? Alcoholic, greedy? Hurt you? Grace was now curious about Lexi's husband. He's ex-military, retired colonel. But as you know, there's no such thing as ex-military. No, he's not a drunk. He's not greedy. His pension is good. We live at my place. We also rent his apartment. It's okay. But I live like I'm in the army, Grace. Anything goes wrong, all I hear is, stand down, round and round. Grace could barely contain her laughter. That's exactly the kind of husband Lexi needed to put the brakes on her hubris and selfishness. He's used to being in charge. Now he's got me under his command. Lexi kept complaining. He's nagging me about not talking to Ellen. And it's not easy for me to be in a quarrel with Ellen. My son and grandchildren come to see me, but my daughter doesn't. Grace, I beg you, please help us to reconcile with Helen. Then at least Vincent won't nag me about it, Lexi asked. Nothing has changed, Grace thought. Even now, Lexi's not thinking about her daughter and grandchild, but about making sure Vincent doesn't nag her for fighting with her daughter. Tell her to call me and I'll be waiting. Help me, Grace. I'll try, but I can't promise anything. I'm afraid you've pushed her too far away from you. We have to take the first steps toward each other. And I'm ready. I just don't have her contacts. Otherwise, Vincent would have dragged me to Helen, Grace said. Vincent was intriguing her more and more. She couldn't resist asking. How did you meet your husband? At the resort. I'd been seeing him for 6 years. He's a widower and kept trying to marry me. But I kept putting it off, Lexi explained. I knew a man was a lot of work, Grace snickered. And you're not used to hard work. All right, well, it was good to see you, she changed her tone. I'll tell Ellen I saw you and that you're waiting for her call. Goodbye, Lexi. I'll be waiting, Lexi shouted after her. Well, Ellen, we should call Mom, Grace pondered. She's going to be waiting, no matter what. I'm afraid, Ellen admitted. I'm afraid she might ruin what I have now. I feel sorry for her, and I have often thought of reconciliation. And Vincent says you can't choose your mothers, you have to reconcile. But every time I think of what she's done to me, I don't want to take that step. Don't be afraid, Helene, Vincent said. She won't destroy what we have between us. But you'll feel better if you make peace with your mother. At peace? Helene asked doubtfully. By all means. A bad peace is better than a good quarrel. And then there's Commander-in-Chief Pete. I don't know what his middle name is, but he keeps Lexi's battles going, Grace laughed. Hello, Mom. Ellen called Lexi. Daughter, it's so good to hear from you, came Lexi's voice. Pete sat next to her and nodded his head in satisfaction. Lexi looked at her husband with a sidelong glance. She wanted so badly to express her grievances, but with Pete around, the chances were nil. Daughter, I'm so excited to see you, to meet your husband, to hold Alex in my arms. If you knew how much I miss you. You know I got married too, right? You should meet Pete. He's a wonderful man. No more eulogies, Pete said loudly. Ellen heard his commanding voice and smiled. Finally, someone can control Mom's temper. Daughter, Pete and I are expecting you on Sunday. Will you come? Lexi asked. No more questions. Pete's voice came again. Yes, I'll talk to Vincent, Ellen answered. Hello, Ellen. I'm Pete, a retired colonel and Lexi's husband. Lexi and I are expecting on Sunday. No refusal is accepted, Pete Kondratievich said confidently. Okay, Vincent? We'll come. Will definitely come, Vincent smiled, seeing how Pete had the situation under control. We'll be waiting. Goodbye. Pete said goodbye and handed the phone to Lexi. I'm so glad, my daughter. Tears of joy rolled down Lexi's cheeks. See you later. She pressed disconnect. No more tears, Pete said, smiling. They ruin a girl's beauty. He hugged Lexi convincingly. She rested her head on his shoulder, and in that moment was grateful for her husband's support. We need to get groceries for the table, Lexi said, coming to her senses. We'll go tomorrow. We'll get everything, Pete nodded. Are you okay? I see your face is red. Let's take your blood pressure, or we won't have guests coming to our house, but to your hospital. Pete kept a close eye on his wife's condition, concerned for her health. His determination and concern helped Lexi keep the situation under control.